Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ABC 9, Whitaker vs. de Ridder, also known as UFC Abu Dhabi. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, in place of my usual co-host, Keith Schillen, is Mr. Dane Fox, reporting from the Sherdog.com staff and from the beautiful Intermountain West. Dane, how are you doing today?
Doing excellent. Always happy to fill in for Keith and talk some fights. You know, I mean, hell, why else would I take this job if I didn't enjoy that? So
it's not the paycheck. I can attest to that. Kind of like fighters, media people in this business, you got to have some love for this because the juice ain't worth the squeeze otherwise. I love having you on board. Always fun to change things up with a guest host. For me, the main difference between you and Keith is when I say Happy Valley, Keith thinks State College, Pennsylvania. You think Central Utah. So aside from that, we're going to get along just fine. We're talking about UFC Abu Dhabi. 12-fight card headlined by former middleweight champ Robert Whitaker, and so far, surprising new factor in the UFC, high-level one championship export Reinier de Ridder. So we are at this point not even 24 hours removed from UFC 318, Holloway versus Poirier 3. An interesting pay-per-view card because it was more or less built around the Dustin Poirier retirement fight, while the end product ended up offering a ton of extravagant violence on the prelims. On paper, it wasn't really a worthy pay-per-view, if we're being honest. There might have been 0 top 10 fighters on the card outside of the main event. Here, we're going to one of their other niche type cards, because obviously in this era we have the Apex card, which
yes,
I think most fans are getting kind of done with. It's clearly a different class of card than even when they take things on the road. Then you have their ESPN and ABC cards where they will hit destination cities, UFC Columbus, UFC Austin, UFC Nashville. And then you have the pay-per-views, which aside from weird exceptions tend to be pretty loaded. And then you have the Middle East cards, the Abu Dhabi, the Saudi Arabia, where if you look at this card, there are a lot of refugees on this card. And I don't mean political refugees in the strict sense, but I think there are a half dozen fighters on this card that have not proven that they can get visas to fight in the United States, Canada, or Western Europe. Which,
well, yeah, I mean,
Magomedov
looks like, yeah, exactly. He looks like a villain, so I can't blame the U.S. for not giving him a visa.
Sharabutdin 100% getting profiled by air marshals if he tries to get on a plane.
Exactly.
But there are other ones, kind of more quietly, like we're not sure if somebody like, Aslan or Mohammad Yahya would be able to, on short notice, get a visa and come fight in, God, I say the West like I'm on like CNN or Fox News or something, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of that, these cards take on almost a weird exhibition feel to me. Obviously, the fights matter. They go on their professional records. The UFC signs or doesn't re-sign them based on the outcomes of these fights. But at the same time, there's no way in hell the UFC is going to let somebody get into title contention that can't fight on pay-per-views in North America. So there's a hard ceiling on what some of these fighters can do. It's just kind of odd. I asked you this during our little sound check. I'm going to throw it back at you now because I think it's a worthwhile question. Outside of the Robert Whitaker versus Reinier de Ridder main event, which fight would you say you're looking forward to most on this card?
Oh man, that is a mixed bag. Sometimes I think, you know what, Nikita Krylov and Bogdan Guskov looks like it could just be absolute ridiculousness. And for that factor, it's like, maybe I'm interested in that one just because it looks stupidly entertaining. Beyond that, it's there's it McGee and beyond maybe. I don't know. When Pico and Evloev went bye-bye, that beyond the main event, it was like, crap, that was the fight I wanted to see.
And so do I, but in a strange way, I'm a little happy that the Movsar Evloev versus Aaron Pico co-main event ended up getting canceled, because I maintain a soft spot in my heart and some prospect expectation for Aaron Pico, despite how many times he's kind of broken our hearts over the last few years. And to put him in his UFC debut in a co-main event in Abu Dhabi in what I'm pretty sure would have been his first 5-round fight against an absolute machine like Movsar Evloev, just it reeked of offering him up for slaughter, trying to put over somebody that they're more interested in. I'm glad that he's going to get, if not a softer, at least a little bit of a different landing than that. And obviously, when the UFC acquires properties, whether it's individual free agents or it's whole promotions and deciding which of their contracts, to keep or not, the UFC has no responsibility to anyone but themselves and their parent company to get the best value possible. And
Absolutely.
so high-level debutantes coming from other promotions get all different kinds of treatment. I still believe that when Michael Chandler came over from Bellator, 6 or 7 years ago at this point, and he debuted against Dan Hooker, they only announced him as the Bellator lightweight champ because they thought he was going to lose to Hooker, and they just wanted to stick it to Bellator. The UFC's responsibility or priority is, it probably should be, to themselves, rather than the sport as a whole. But again, as a guy that's still waiting for Aaron Pico to turn that corner, I'm almost glad it's not happening on Saturday.
I totally get where you're coming from, and I think that's 100% valid. Just from a pure entertainment perspective, it's like, Pico, he's got the talent that he could be the one that upends Evloev. He really could be. And he's been out of the cage long enough that he could be making those strides that, you hear Keith talking about how young guys can grow by leaps and bounds while they're away. And Pico's still young enough that he could do that. So it was one of those fights that I'm like, I'm pretty sure that Evloev could do it, not Evloev. Evloev wins, but Pico could pull the upset.
Yeah. I think Pico's still just 27 years old.
Yeah.
He's starting to defy the laws of space and time. At this point, he's been a busted prospect for longer than he's been alive. I agree with you that Petr Yan versus Marcus McGee should be a real fun co-main event. Nikita Krylov versus Bogdan Guskov. Your friend and mine, Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie, would refer to that fight as a fight that's going to go until fist go boop. And I would say that's correct. Either that or until one guy just stupidly lowers his head into a guillotine, choked by the other. But there's a huge chance that fight ends hilariously, stupidly, or both. So
exactly,
I'm here for it. And complaints aside, we can only hope that the first 6 fights out of the gate here end violently like they did at UFC 318 last night, but I think we're going to see some nastiness on this card, and we haven't even talked about the UFC debut of Marcus Buchecha. So yeah, plenty of goodies on this card. Any other general thoughts on this one before we dive into the prelims?
It'll be good to have the fights done and over with middle of the day as opposed to into the wee hours of the night. So I kind of like these morning cards.
Yeah, I don't mind that one bit either. First up at UFC Abu Dhabi, assuming the card order stays the same from here on out, is a bantamweight matchup between Davey Grant and Damon Blackshear. Grant, the 39-year-old Brit, is 16-7 overall. He is 7-6 since joining the UFC out of season 18 of The Ultimate Fighter. He is coming in off a win. He fought most recently at UFC on ESPN Covington versus Buckley, the last card of 2024, where he picked up a unanimous decision over Ramon Taveras. So he will look to build on that momentum even as he approaches his 40th birthday this December at the expense of Blackshear. 30-year-old from North Carolina is 17-7-1 overall. He is 5-3-1 since joining the UFC as the former CFFC bantamweight champ. He is coming in on a 3-fight win streak, going back, at this point, almost a full year. He's already fought twice this year. He fought in March, tapping out Cody Gibson in the second round, then came back just 6 weeks later at UFC on ESPN Gary versus Prates in April and picked up a unanimous decision over Alatang Lee. So Blackshear looking to move from prospect to contender in this division with his 4th straight win, and he is comfortably favored to do so. Blackshear is -270, Grant +210. An interesting storyline that kind of came out of UFC 318 last night was the older fighters, the ones who looked shop worn, the ones who were underdogs to younger fighters, kind of there to put the new names over, generally overperforming in almost every case. None more stunningly than Michael Johnson beating Daniel Zellhuber soundly at age 40. And Dev, who joined me on the recap last night, made the case that Michael Johnson is performing well or performing better at his general age cohort than anybody else in high-level MMA south of about 205 pounds. I agreed with him because I knew what he was getting at. Because here's the thing. Davey Grant is less than a year younger than Michael Johnson, but Michael Johnson, as a guy whose game has always run on fast twitch athleticism and reflexes, it wouldn't have been expected that he would still be performing well at 40. The good news for someone like Davey Grant, whose game never ran on high-end athleticism, is that it's probably going to age more gracefully. The flip side of Davey Grant's dilemma is his game is always also kind of run on durability and grind, and that doesn't always follow you into your late 30s or into your 40s. But at least as of right now, Grant has won 3 of his last 4, and he still appears to be the same guy he has been since coming out of Tough. It's not like he woke up one day and he was just 39. He's been kind of a minus athlete by the standards of the division for at least as long as we've known about him, and he's been in the UFC for like a decade at this point. Davey Grant's genius, the thing that's made him great and made him a more indispensable part of this division than a 7-6 UFC record would indicate, is that he's the perfect kind of test for up-and-coming prospects because he's good at pulling them into his kind of fight. You look at some of the people he's beaten, or at least given a really good test to. Like, he beat Jonathan Martinez. He gave Adrian Yanez everything he could handle. He beat Ramon Tavares. He gave Daniel Marcos, he took Daniel Marcos to a split decision. Those guys are all younger. Most of them have reach on them. They're all faster than he is. Most of them even hit harder than he does, and yet he kind of manages to pull them into grindy, ugly striking battles. He takes pretty strikers and makes them ugly. He's a pretty good wrestler for a Brit, and uses that to kind of slow things down. Just he likes to kind of, I say he likes to get fights stuck in the mud, and that makes it sound like he turns them into boring fights. He doesn't. He just turns them into slugfest at his pace. It's a really nice thing he does, and this is going to be an interesting test of it because Blackshear is younger, he's bigger, he's more athletic, he's more offensively dynamic, but it's all in ways outside of the striking. He's a guy whose striking has really had to catch up to the rest of his game. I hate this comparison because it makes me feel like lazy as an analyst and probably like pings my white liberal guilt radar, but I'm like, don't compare him to Aljamain. Don't compare him to Aljamain. Don't compare him to Aljamain. Okay, no, they're both black bantamweights that you expect they're going to be a hot shit striker, and what they actually are is a super creative, aggressive grappler. Like that's the game. And Blackshear, kind of like Aljamain, he's had some rough outings when people have just been able to bop him in the face and take advantage of the fact that he's not actually super defensively sound on the feet and sometimes doesn't guard his face quite as well as he should while he's going for kind of low percentage rolly takedowns that are meant to cause scrambles. That seems to be coming around. Again, he's won 3 straight fights. He's going for his 4th. You don't win 4 straight fights in a division as deep and diverse as men's bantamweight without having a pretty deep and diverse skill set yourself. The last people to beat Damon Blackshear were Montel Jackson, who blasted him in the face in like 15 seconds. Davey Grant ain't going to do that. And Mario Bautista, who fought a very disciplined kickboxing game, kept kicking his legs, just made it hellish for Blackshear to try to get in range and get his hands on him. Just a very textbook kind of sprawl and brawl type game. That's something that Grant maybe could do to Blackshear, but he doesn't have quite the same sting that Bautista has on his strikes. It would just he'd have to be really threading a needle to have that kind of fight against Blackshear. The question for me is, if and when Blackshear gets Grant down, what does it look like? Because Grant's always been pretty well capable of taking care of himself on the ground. Like I said, he's a pretty good wrestler, surprisingly good offensive wrestler, pretty good defensive wrestler. A lot of his opponents haven't even really tested it. Blackshear is going to. I'm expecting that Blackshear is going to get Grant down, and I am guessing that Grant is probably going to be a little too wily, a little too tough for Blackshear to just blow through and like slap a twister or a calf slicer or something on. And considering that as the fight wears on, I expect the Blackshear will slow down a little bit while Grant tends to be rock solid in 3-round fights. I'm thinking the Blackshear wins the decision, but it's probably even like a 29-28 where Grant picks up some steam in the final round. Blackshear can't get him down. Grant's popping him in the face. UFC booth is going crazy like Grant's going to pull off this buzzer beater knockout or something. But yeah, give me Blackshear by decision in a real fun fight where he does have to kind of hold on at the end.
Yeah, can't disagree with anything you said there. Grant's one of those guys that you expected him to have been cut years ago. You know, he was inactive for the first part of his UFC run. I think he debuted in 2013 and didn't have his second fight until about 2016. Had a couple of more periods where he didn't fight for over a year. And generally the UFC tends not to have a hell of a lot of patience for those kinds of guys, especially if they aren't somebody who rates as a prospect who's going to do big things. And that was never Grant. Nevertheless, over the last 5 years, he's kind of developed himself into somebody that guys like me and you, analysts, that you just can't help but root for, knowing his shortcomings. And despite those shortcomings, he's been able to find success. And I think a lot of that has to do just with the fact that he's been in the game for so long now. He's picked up a lot of the tricks of the trade that you know tends to come around when you're a veteran. And he's been able to use that to his advantage. And I'm starting to kind of see that with Blackshear as well, you know, and a lot of times it's no secret. The key to success with MMA is get the fight where you want the fight to be. And Blackshear's been doing a better job of that, but that's what Grant's been doing better too. You know, he's not going to win a fight staying on the outside and picking his opponent apart. He's not really a rugged wrestler. He can definitely hold his own on the ground, like you said. He's pretty wily, but he's not a slick submission expert either. What he does best is make the fight nice and dirty. And where he's at his best, you know, just kind of sticking in the pocket, throwing lefts, rights, boxing, you know, all that fun stuff. That's where Blackshear's at his weakest. Blackshear can circle on the outside, you know, kind of pop shot a little bit, or he can clinch up and start looking for trip takedowns and then take the fight to the ground. And where he's extremely wily on the ground himself, looking for submissions. But the question is whether or not he can get Grant to the ground enough. Like he'll get him down at some point. That I have no doubt. The question is, can he get him down, keep him down, and do that enough? Because I'm with you. I don't think that he's going to be able to finish Grant. Grant's one of the smartest vets in the division at this point. So I'm wondering if he can hold him down enough to counterweight Grant winning the stand-up battle. Because I think Grant is going to be winning that. You know, like you said, Blackshear does compare very much to Aljamain. I 100% agree with you on that. He's doesn't have the type of power that you would expect from somebody like him. So I think that he'll, you know, if there's going to be somebody getting clocked, it's 100% going to be Blackshear getting clocked. You know, Grant's done it multiple times, and Grant's got a sixth sense for the opportunistic as well. You know, I think back to his triangle choke of a Sun Tzu. That inverted triangle choke. Yeah, that was just incredible. Very opportunistic on his part. And Blackshear's, he's not Nikita Krylov. He's not going to create the mistakes at that level. But I do think that, if there's an opening, Grant's more likely going to be the one to expose that. So I was actually surprised at how wide the odds are. I take that it has to do something with Grant's age, because, at this point, the wheels could fall off for Grant at any point. I fully acknowledge that. So I say this with hesitation just because the age is worrying me as well. But I'm going to say that Grant opens up the night with an upset. I think that he's got a shorter distance to travel. I think that's something that can be underrated when thinking about these cards in the Middle East, because, Blackshear is traveling halfway around the world for Grant. I mean, it's not like England to UAE is a short distance, but it's a hell of a lot shorter than it is from the States. And so I'm going to say that Grant pulls off the upset, scoring a contentious decision.
All right. So Dame Fox coming hot right out of the gate. He is the host equivalent of the short notice fighter who just comes out swinging haymakers. Next up at UFC on ABC 9 is a featherweight bout where Muhammad Yahya will look to make more history, hopefully of the other kind, as he takes on Stephen Nguyen. Yahya, the 31-year-old Emirati, is 12-5 overall. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC as the former UAE Warriors lightweight champ, and he made history, as I kind of alluded to, as the first Emirati fighter in UFC history, despite the fact that Abu Dhabi was effectively the UFC's home away from home for the entire first year of COVID. He's the first fighter from the host country to fight in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news, like I said, is that he's 0-2. He lost his debut to Trevor Peek back in October of 2023. Then came back last August and got knocked out by Cowboy Fernandez in the first round. So he's looking to turn things around here. He is dropping from 155 to 145 pounds, and looking to stop him in that pursuit will be Nguyen, who is also looking for his first UFC win. 32-year-old fighting out of Dallas, 9-2 overall. 0-1 since joining the UFC as that rarest of animals, a 3-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on season 3 and lost, fought on season 5 and won, and then fought again on season 7, won once again, and his knockout of AJ Cunningham was enough to finally get him the deal. He made his debut last March at UFC on ESPN, Ribas versus Namajunas, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Yarno Aarons. He's been on the shelf ever since. He steps back in here, like I said, also looking for his first UFC win. He is comfortably favored to get it. Nguyen is minus 350. Yahya plus 280 coming back. I'm not going to lie. I don't get the line here. And I'll start right out by saying I'm not dead sure that either of these guys is UFC material. And if it were Keith co-hosting with me, he would accuse me of being too nice. And he would just blurt out, neither of these guys is UFC material. And he might be right. Here's the thing. Yahya's a nice story, but it's just not worked so far. Because even at the UAE Warriors level, he's a long, lanky lightweight. He'll be an even longer and lankier featherweight, and presents as sort of a stand-up kickboxer that does his best when he can. I mean, he's kind of a neutralizer. He wants a slow to medium paced outside kickboxing battle where preferably he's leading the dance and just trusts himself to win 2 rounds out of 3 or win all 3 rounds that way. It is a fight style that inherently has very narrow margins for error. You're talking about an individual sport with a lot of chaos in it and not always the most reliable judging. If your game plan basically involves winning close decisions, you're taking your life in your hands. But at the UFC level, it's not even worked to that level. As a regional fighter, his athleticism, his strength, his balance were good enough to keep him upright when he wanted the fight to stay upright. But he debuted against Trevor Peek, and really the only thing Peek has going for him is that he's strong, medium athletic, and kind of scrappy, and he couldn't keep Peek off him. Peek just kind of bullied him, took him down a bunch of times just by kind of picking him up and throwing him down. Yahya just couldn't keep the guy off him. Then he came back, fought Cowboy Fernandez, somebody who wanted to have a kickboxing battle with him, and Fernandez blew him up. he was too fast. He hit too hard. He exposed Yahya's lack of head movement, his tendency to come in and come out on straight lines. It was ugly. I mean, I think the thing was over in like 4 minutes or something, and it could have been over in 2. All that in mind, I am glad he's moving down to 145 pounds. If the best possible outcome for Yahya is that he ends up being not only the first Emirati in the UFC, but the first Emirati to get a win in the UFC, I think 145 might be a good place to find it. And honestly, Nguyen might be the guy to find it against, because he has not exactly been as advertised either. First off, if you had to fight 3 times on the Contender Series to make it to the UFC, especially after about season 2, that might be an argument in itself that you aren't UFC material. Because if you won on season 5 of the Contender Series and didn't get signed, you were the exception. The UFC was signing 85% of the winners by that point. And like, I went back and watched all of his Contender Series fights. In a vacuum, he looks like he could almost be a mirror match for Yahya, a tall, lanky kickboxer with, not tons of power, but just sort of cumulative power from, throwing a constant medium diet of strikes. But when he made his debut in the UFC, he was taking on Yarno Aarons, who is yet another kind of straight up European style kickboxer. And I thought of Aarons as someone that had decent technique and just not a ton of athleticism or zip behind it physically. But Nguyen was the one that was getting beat to the punch by Aarons over and over again. So these two guys, I think they're going to want the same kind of fight, generally speaking. And it's almost a race to the bottom. Like, I feel bad saying that about these two guys, but they're both going to want the same kind of fight, I think. They're both going to want to snipe each other from medium to outside range. And if things get, if they get into too close a quarters, I think it'll be Yahya's instinct to initiate the clinch, do a little damage there, and either disengage and move out to range, or, trip him to the ground, don't follow him down and move back out to range. Whereas Nguyen's probably going to want to just keep to the outside of, punching distance, outside of the phone booth. I have the feeling that this is going to be a fight that it's going to feel like a women's flyweight fight, where it's this medium-paced, low-power kickboxing match where one fighter is pretty obviously superior right off the bat, but they're not going to finish the other, so you just buckle in and watch 15 minutes of cardio kickboxing. I do favor Nguyen. I think he has more upside. I think he's going to be a little bigger than Yahya, even though Yahya is the one moving down in weight. I think he is a little quicker and a little bit of a harder hitter. Give me Nguyen by decision, but I definitely do not have minus 350 levels of confidence in this pick. If Yahya turns out to be the superior striker 45 seconds into this fight, I'm just going to buckle up to be dead wrong and have Yahya win this thing 30-27 and just throw my hands up. That's how I feel about this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those fights where Keith would speak up and say that Stephen Nguyen shouldn't be a 3.5 favorite to 1 over anybody. And I think I would have to agree with him. Like, he's the rightful favorite, but 3.5 to 1 over anybody that's in the UFC, that should tell you that they shouldn't be in the UFC, because we don't even know if Nguyen should be, like, exactly like you said. I can't add too much more to what you said. I could go on a tangent and say what the hell has Nguyen been doing, because like it looks like his goal has solely been to get to the UFC, because he had the first Contender Series fight in 2019, then he fought again in 2021. He did have a fight in between there, but then he didn't fight between that appearance and the next one in 2023. It's like, dude, if Joshua Van has taught us anything, it's get in the cage and fight as often as possible if you're looking to advance your career, because that is the best learning ground. And so I see what somebody like Nguyen has done with their career, and I'm just like, but fight more. You've been a pro for a long time. Over the last 6 years, you've had 5 fights. No wonder your career stalled out when you were once upon a time looked at as a solid prospect. But I digress. Anyway, Yeah, I'm not crazy about either of these. I do think, it's pretty easy to tell that Nguyen is a better athlete. That doesn't mean he's a great athlete. It's just, a lot of times when the UFC signs these guys as the first person from this country, they're underwhelming. Like I believe the first Chinese fighter was Tia Train Zhang.
I was joking about him in the Sherdog Slack last night because we were talking about. Oh, Jay Petrie was talking about how in a country as MMA violent as Poland, why does the UFC hang on to Marcin Kraknio and Lucas Dresky? And I was like, the UFC is weird about overseas talents. They sent Sean Shelby to China for a month, and he came back with Chichuan Zhang, a guy with a mullet, a guillotine, and an age cut of like 10 years.
Yeah.
And knowing that Weili Zhang was there at the time already doing work, it's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
I mean, there were no women in the UFC yet, so that's not fair. But you know what I mean? Country of a billion people when he came back with the Mongolian Wolf.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So a lot of times the first representative, I am anticipating them to be underwhelming. Like, I can't think of the last time when the first person who came from a particular country into the UFC was just a regular ass kicker, and so I don't want to crap too much on Yahya. I mean, good for him for even making it here. And when he first got signed, I thought he was worth taking a look at, but I haven't seen anything out of him in the two appearances that he's had. Like you said, if you're getting bullied by Trevor Peak, that's not a good sign. I mean, Peak's fun, but we all know what he is, and when we haven't seen enough of him for me to feel completely comfortable saying that he's gonna wipe Yahya up and down, but I almost by default, just because Nguyen was competitive with Aaron's, and he was competitive with he knocked out AJ Cunningham. He knocked out Cunningham. Yeah. Looked pretty good in that win. So I feel like just by default I have to go with Nguyen. And I'll say that Yahya doesn't respond well to the weight cut. This is something Nguyen has done several times, and so Nguyen will get an early knockout. We'll say second round TKO.
Heavyweights take the cage next in Abu Dhabi as Martin Buday welcomes Marcus Buchecha Almeida to the UFC. Buday, the 33-year-old Slovakian, is 15-2 overall. He is 6-1 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's on a 2-fight winning streak since his lone UFC loss to Shamil Gaziev like 18 months ago. He has a win last June over Andrei Arlovsky, and then has already fought once this year. It was at UFC on ESPN Emmett versus Murphy back in April, where he won a unanimous decision over Uran Satibaldiev. So Buday looking to continue to make sneaky progress in the UFC heavyweight division. He has a tall test ahead of him in the form of the debuting Almeida. 35-year-old Brazilian is 5-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. This will be his UFC debut. He fought most recently last November at One Championship 169, where he choked out Amir Ali Akbari in the first round. This is Almeida's UFC debut. He was briefly a heavyweight standout in One Championship. The reason we care about this guy is that he is, if not the greatest heavyweight grappler of all time, he is on the short list and possibly on the Mount Rushmore. He is a 2-time Abu Dhabi champ. He is a 7-time Mundials champ. He is a, I believe, 3-time Nogi world champ. He, like the other person in the discussion for the greatest heavyweight grappler of his era, Gordon Ryan, they had a dead close matchup where Almeida lost due to a weird technical point deduction. It's the kind of grappling match that, if you're not an advanced grappler yourself, looked a hell of a lot like a stalemate. But anyway, he's one of the greatest grapplers of all time. And from the moment he expressed interest in MMA, it kind of perked people's ears up because of the kind of grappler he is. We'll get to that in a minute. First, let's talk about the odds. Almeida, unsurprisingly, the favorite, but not ridiculously off the charts. So he is minus 210. Buday is plus 175. I actually kind of like that, because Buday he continues to be better than I think he's going to be every time out. But I thought this guy was gonna be kind of a joke, and even by the standards of the UFC heavyweight division, wasn't gonna make much progress. But instead, he is 6-1 in the UFC. If he manages to get past Buchecha, he's probably fighting the top 10 guy in his next fight. And if he beats that guy, he's probably in the title picture. That's heavyweight for you, and that's Martin Buday. Buday's, having said that mea culpa, he's better than I thought he was. Still, the thing he's best at is being absolutely fucking titanic. There are heavyweights, and there are heavyweights. There are heavyweights that weigh in at 265, and there are heavyweights that weigh in at 265 after cutting 20 pounds. Martin Buday is one of the largest people to compete in the UFC heavyweight division. And I don't know how much live contact you've had with fighters, Dane. I mean, I know you've been a fan for a long time. You've been in the business for a long time. But if you've been around, top level heavyweights, you know that there are some of them that like, oh, you're a big dude. And there are others where as soon as they walk into a room, even if you're not facing them, just like your head is gravitationally pulled to the doorway, like, who the hell just walked into this room? Buday is one of those guys, and there's just a few like him, good or bad. And honestly, he even looks a little like him. He's kind of like Slovakian Ben Rothwell, where it's just like, oh, you're even big compared to like the Mears and Verdums of the world. You are a giant guy. He's that. And obviously the UFC booth is going to mention it when he walks out because they need to talk about something. He's a guy that used to weigh like 360 pounds and lost a ton of weight and basically started getting into MMA to get in better shape. And whenever somebody has the backstory of, I walked into a gym because I was out of shape and I wanted to get in better shape, and that person's story ends in the UFC, they're almost always either a heavyweight or like a woman. I just and
Betch Correa and Lauren Murphy, right?
Betch Correa and Lauren Murphy are two that I thought of right off the bat.
Yep.
Martin Buday is one, and only saved from being in that category because he cut so much weight that he looks insane now is like Khalil Roundtree.
Yep, that's exactly who I was thinking too. Yep.
And hey, fair play. I'm not saying it's criticism because the man that gave me that belt that's on the table back there, Professor Alex Moreno, is another one of them. One of the few that's not a heavyweight or a woman. And yeah, it's just because those tend to be thinner divisions. Pun not intended. Anyway, Buday, like you would expect of a guy that used to be carrying 100 more pounds on his frame, and like someone like Ben Rothwell, is actually more nimble on his feet than you would expect for a 6'5", 285-pound guy. I'm not saying he's, Tom Aspinall or Cyril Gane out there. He's not doing any ballet, but he's not as flat-footed and plodding as you would expect. And again, like you might expect of somebody that used to weigh 3.5 bills and started doing this to get in better shape, he's able to maintain whatever pace he pushes for 15 minutes. That's, he's lost fights in the UFC. He's won fights in the UFC, but the fight he lost was not because he got tired first. It's because he got punched in the face too much. Because of that, there is some upset potential here against Buchecha. I'll get to that in a sec. Let's talk about Buchecha for a minute. I already said, one of the greatest grapplers in his category, like heavyweight / open weight absolute in the history of BJJ, but specifically because of the kind of grappler he was and is, as soon as he expressed interest in coming to MMA, it's like, oh, okay, great, bring it on. Because Marcus Almeida is an athlete, capital A athlete. He is nimble, fluid, explosive. He's the kind of guy that obviously he had and has great grappling technique. You don't win Mundials 7 times without having a comprehensive knowledge of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But he also, not just having perfect technique, is able to make things go because he's so strong, because he just has such great proprioception, just like being able to just balance and instincts and knowing where your body is and your opponent's body is and being able to move more fluidly and more explosively. Just the wrestling, like the wrestling counterexample I always use is Michael Chandler, where, yeah, Michael Chandler is absolutely a very good technical wrestler, but also because he's such an explosive athlete, he's able to make stuff work that other wrestlers might not. Like, you know, you can sprawl perfectly on a Michael Chandler single leg and he'll just still hoist you over his head and throw you just because he can. He's that strong. That's a little of what Buchecha brings. It's a little bit of a heavyweight Jacare. You know what I mean? That kind of thing where, oh, if this guy learns to throw a straight punch and shoot a double leg without pajamas on, look out. And that's more or less what we've gotten from Almeida. Having said all that, he's barely been tested. The people that he was fighting over in one championship, win or lose, I'm sorry, like, there's some clowns. The UFC's heavyweight division sucks, and the UFC can basically have any heavyweights that it wants. Like, so if you're limited to drawing on what the UFC doesn't want, your heavyweight division is going to suck. Like, he lost to not Bombardier, Rug. I get my Senegalese wrestler, but the way that Rug beat him is something that Buday could do, because all Buday did was, or all Rug did was be huge, have really good balance on his feet, because hell, Rug comes from a sport where the whole sport is to stand and try to throw the other guy on the ground and try not to get thrown down yourself. Like, it is nothing but brute strength and balance. All he did was be huge, have great balance, make himself hard to take down, and just kind of finally wear out the guy with the more explosive movements. Buday could absolutely do that. He could do it without moving very much. I'm not calling for the upset, because on top of everything else, Buday does not have good hand speed, and his head movement is practically nil. He has classic tall man striking defense, where his defense, if something gets past his hands, is just to pull straight back. And I'm 5'9", so I don't understand what 6'5", 6'7" people are seeing when they do that. All I know is that from where I stand, it doesn't work. Nobody is so much shorter than you that they can't clock you with an overhand, even if you're 10 inches taller than them. I don't know why so many tall fighters do it, but I'm thinking this is the kind of fight that it's going to be a good debut fight for Almeida, because if he is able to just dive in on Buday's hips, either trip him, landing guard, or just fall back to guard himself and quickly sweep him, he could tap out Buday in 2 minutes. Hooray. But if he has any trouble getting Buday down, I also think he can punch Buday in the face. Almeida's own striking is definitely a work in progress. He doesn't throw in combination very well. The more tired he gets, the more adrenaline he gets, like the loopier his punches get, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. But things are coming fast and with a ton of power. Again, kind of like early Jacare. Because of that, I do think this is a good debut for Almeida. Nobody can accuse the UFC of soft pedaling him. They're giving him a guy who's 6-1 in the UFC and is going to probably outweigh him by 30 pounds in the cage. But Almeida has multiple routes to victory. There aren't going to be many UFC heavyweights that Almeida could probably beat without even trying to take him down. Buday might be one of them, but Buday really only has one obvious route to victory, and that's to outlast, stay upright, get Buchecha tired, and if he's going to mount any offense, it's going to be in the second half of the fight when all of a sudden he's the one pushing a tired Buchecha into the fence, making him wear the weight, and just making life miserable for him. I'm going to take Almeida by first round submission here, but if this thing gets past the 3-minute mark, or if Almeida tries an earnest takedown in the first half of the first round and can't get it for whatever reason, this fight gets a whole lot more interesting all of a sudden. Like, I am raptly, morbidly excited for this fight. Like, we were talking about what fight we were most excited for on the card, And I had this on the list, but now I'm like, no, this is the one. I'm ready for this. And this might be the most excited I've ever been for a fight between two unranked heavyweights. I don't know. I'm talking myself into it. Give me Almeida by first round submission, but even if it just turns into a walrus slap fest, slapping titties, unranked heavyweight shit show, we will have learned something about Marcus Almeida. And hey, at worst, I'm here to learn. So yeah, I'll take Almeida by submission, but I cannot wait for this one.
I can't help but laugh at just the image, slapping titties, because it's in UAE, so it's going to be nice and hot and sweaty in there, and that they're going to be tired, and there's just going to be all sorts of slapping if it goes beyond the first round. So my first thought with regards to Buchecha coming over was, how have heavyweights with a impressive grappling resume done when transitioning over to MMA with limited MMA experience? And there were two names that came to mind. The first one we all get a good laugh at, Hoyas Gracie. The Gracie name, the Gracie clan still hasn't forgiven him for that, and I don't think they ever will, because that was one of the most ultimate shit shows. Like, UFC almost always gives fighters 2 fights. Hoya's only got 1, so ouch, that was bad. And the other one, we're going to go back even further. Marcio Cruz, Patapeno. And he came up at a time, I think it was 2005 when he made his debut. And he came up at a time when MMA was still kind of, I don't want to say in its infancy, but it was still a little bit more, we'll say, forgiving of fighters with really only one field in which they excel in. And Cruz was purely a grappler, but don't get me wrong, he was a good grappler, good athlete, and he was able to pick up a win over Frank Mir. I think people forget about that.
I don't forget about it. I'm still salty.
Because throwing the fact that we want to forget that fight, because, oh man, it took Mir a little while to come back from that motorcycle accident. But anyway, and so Cruz ended up washing out relatively quickly shortly after that. And I wonder if it would be the same story for Buchecha, but there's a couple of things that have me feeling more optimistic. Number one, while Cruz wasn't a bad athlete for the time at heavyweight, Buchecha is legit a good athlete at heavyweight. That's one of the things that I think has you so excited about him coming over, is because...
I mean, is it fair to compare him physically to Aspinall? Like, roughly the same size, body composition, like, nimbleness?
I think it's possible. Like, because he still hasn't figured out how to strike, his striking is still rudimentary. We don't see the athleticism coming from him the way that we see it in Aspinall, because Aspinall just glides through the ring. So, but on the mat, it's a lot easier to see it. The problem is, let's be honest with you, even in this age where, the UFC's been around 30 plus years, people are still like, oh, why are they taking it to the ground? So they don't appreciate what he can do athletically on the ground as much as they would if they were able to see him in his stand-up. And the other thing that gives me greater hope for him is the fact that he's working at ATT. He's not working with the same people that he was working with as he was doing Mundials and all that fun stuff. He's actually trying to work with real MMA coaches, round out his game, and become a legit MMA fighter, as opposed to a grappler dabbling in MMA. And Buday is a tough opponent for him. Like you said, he's 6-1 in the UFC. I don't care how lucky you are. You don't get to 6-1 in the UFC strictly by luck. There's got to be some skill, some intelligence within you. And given heavyweight, that's saying something. The thing that I don't like for Buday in this fight is he wins fights. Like you said, he pushes people up against the cage, slowly wears them down, puts his weight on them to the point where they tend to just kind of give up by the end. It's like, oh man, I got this big dude just pushing me against the cage. This sucks. I can't get out. And it kind of breaks him mentally. But by pressing up against him, he's putting Buchecha where Buchecha wants to fight. He's pressing up against him, which is giving Buchecha the opportunity to get a takedown, or pull off some sort of a slick submission. Because Buchecha, I don't think he would mind pulling guard. Yeah, I get Buday is massive, but Buchecha is talented enough on the ground that, yeah, just so long as he gets it to the ground, he's happy because eventually he'll find where he wants to take the fight. If this was somebody who was more nimble on the feet and could kind of dance around on the outside and pick apart Almeida, I'd be more worried about his debut. But this is one where Buday can't do that. I mean, you said that for his size, he is nimble on the feet, which I absolutely agree with. But like you said, he's massive. There's a reason why you don't see any ballerinas, male ballerinas, we'll say, in the 250, 300 plus range. No matter how nimble you are, you're not that damn nimble. And yeah, Buday he's not going to be able to avoid the takedown attempts by Almeida. He doesn't have the power to cold clock him. And the other thing that, I was saying that you don't get to 6-1 without luck, or by, strictly by luck. But at the same time, the people that he's beat, let's see here, Chris Barnett,
it's
Lucas Bresky, Jake Collier, and Collier was fun, but when he was a heavyweight, holy crap, he was just an overblown heavyweight, or excuse me, light heavyweight. Yeah, no.
Dude,
Josh
he
Parisian,
fought in the UFC at middleweight once. He had like an
exactly.
Yeah.
No, my favorite was that his nickname was the Prototype, and then he ballooned up like that. I'm like, dude, no, you are no longer the Prototype. Why the hell?
Now you're the protoplasm. Like, yeah, what the
exactly. Hell? And then an ancient Andrei Arlovsky, and while I think Iran Sarabaliev has some potential, he was also a natural light heavyweight taking the fight on short notice. So there's a lot of asterisks next to Buday's 6-1 record. So I agree with you. This is a worthy test for Buchecha, but I think that Buday will, by default, he has to give him the fight that Buchecha wants. He's going to give Buchecha the opportunity to take the fight to the ground. And given the freakish physical skills that Almeida does have, I think he can get him to the ground. And while I don't think Buday is terrible on the mat, I don't think that he's going to be a match for Almeida in any way, shape, or form. I'm 100% with you. Almeida gets a first round sub.
The UFC Abu Dhabi prelims soldier on with a hastily thrown together but very interesting men's flyweight contest between Asu Almabayev and Jose Ochoa. Almabayev, the 31-year-old from Kazakhstan, is 21-3 overall. He's 4-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently back in March, where he faced Manel Kape in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 253. He ended up basically being unable to continue midway through the third round. That demoralizing loss snapped a 17-fight win streak for him. The last 4 of them in the UFC blunted the momentum, of one of the longest win streaks of any fighter in a top-level MMA org. He's going to look to get some of that momentum back here. He had been scheduled to take on Ramazan Temirov. Temirov was pulled from the card about 2 weeks ago because of a positive out-of-competition PED test. And in steps Ochoa, 24-year-old Peruvian, now training out of Brazil, is 8-1 with 1 no contest overall. He's 1-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently just about 6 weeks ago, knocking out Cody Durden early in the second round at UFC on ESPN, Usman versus Buckley. Prior to that, he had dropped his UFC debut to Lonnie Kavanaugh last November. So Ochoa looking for his second straight win in the octagon, and a little surprisingly, to me at least, this fight is a dead pick'em. Both these men are minus 110 right now, even odds, despite the fact that Ochoa is stepping up on short notice, fought 6 weeks ago, and is taking on a much more established fighter in Almabayev. But yeah, for the UFC throwing together what they could on short notice, half a world away from their usual base of operations, this is a pretty dope matchup. Give me your thoughts on this one. How do you think it plays out? Who do you think wins? If you think either or both of these guys are future contenders at flyweight, thump on the table and tell me what time it is.
Um, if I think anybody's a future contender, it's Ochoa, largely because if there's anybody that it compares to right now, it is Joshua Van. He's a skilled striker. He's young and relatively inexperienced. Now, Van's picked up a lot of experience, but Ochoa, I'm not sold on him quite yet. And to say that he is Van, like I said, compares to he's not Van by any means yet, but he absolutely looked like an all-star in just battering a typically durable Cody Durden. Durden's got his faults, but he's dogged, he's determined, and typically he can take a beating. And even before the stoppage came, you could see Durden's willingness to keep going kind of wilting towards the end of the first round. For Ochoa to be able to do that to him, that screams that this guy's got a bright future. The question is whether or not he's ready for somebody like Almabayev. Almabayev's not as physically gifted as Ochoa, but he's got a lot more experience. He's a lot more savvy. He's a lot more skilled in the ground game. He was unable to get Manel Kopp down, but if we're being fair, Kopp, it probably tops the list in terms of gifted flyweights. And when Kopp's on, he's a beast to deal with. And I think that Almabayev was dealing with one of the better versions of Kopp that we've seen. So no skin off his back and falling short there. Especially given that Kopp has regularly faced a high level of competitions. So this is going to be something that Ochoa hasn't seen before, because Almabayev can be doggedly determined to get those takedowns. He broke when Kopp was able to make him pay. Do I think that Ochoa has the ability within him to do the same thing to Almabayev that Kopp did? Absolutely. He's got it in him. But I don't think that he's seen anything like that yet. So is he going to be able to deal with Almabayev's constant takedowns? And it's not just the takedowns. It's the fact that Almabayev, he's at this point, he's really not that young. He's what, 31, 20?
31.
Yeah, 31. Okay. Yeah. So he's roughly in his prime for flyweight. And he's seen better or how do I want to put this? I don't want to say better but more talented guys than Ochoa. Well, no, he has with Kopp. I already admitted that. But he's seen guys who with better ground games. We'll put it that way, and he's been able to best them in the wrestling department. Ochoa is going to want to keep the fight standing. If he does, I think that he can hurt Almabayev a couple of times. I don't think that he'll get the stoppage this time around, especially given that he's taken this on short notice. Again, I'll bring this up a couple of times in some of these fights, but short notice going over to the UAE, that's a tough ask, especially flyweights. Cutting down to 125 is tough no matter what. I think Almabayev's veteran savvy. He'll find ways to get takedowns. Ochoa will get tired because I don't think that he's used to the humidity and the weather out there. Almabayev has fought in that area before. It's something that he'll be used to. I think that he gets a workmanlike 15-minute decision. Probably has to survive a scare early should Ochoa clip him, but I think that the vet takes this one.
Yeah, I agree with most of your breakdown there. Almabayev, for a guy that carried a 17-fight win streak into the Kopp fight, even if he beat Kopp, I thought we were kind of starting to see his ceiling. He had gotten about as far as he was going to be able to get with the physical gifts he has, this kind of hard hat approach to things. He struck me and still strikes me as a guy that is probably going to park in the outskirts of the top 10 in this division and stay there for a while. He's the kind of guy that his game might actually age pretty well for flyweight, just because he is such a grinder. But yeah, he looked a little lost against Kopp. Just couldn't deal with the speed, couldn't deal with the power. And this is something that, we Keith and I, or I'll say with Keith on the show a lot, and I'm sure you've heard me say it before. When I say that a fighter broke or wilted or quit, it doesn't mean that I think they're literally scared of getting beaten up. And these people give and take punches for a living. Most of them, where you don't even see it happening. Like, it's not that. It's they don't have an idea. They don't have a plan B. Nothing's working, and so on some level, you just mentally check out. Like, I don't have it tonight. That's what it looked like to me with Almabayev against Kopp. Ochoa, I like the Josh Van comparison. The comparison that I had come with for him, and I don't even know if it's any more valid, was at his best, he looked a little bit like a flyweight Yair Rodriguez, where he was a little longer and lankier, very fast twitch, like fast hands, good natural power, fast kicks. He doesn't use the kicks as much or have quite as diverse an arsenal of kicks as Yair Rodriguez, but just the general body type and explosion. I thought of that comparison. I like the Van comparison as well, even if I think of Van as like more of a compact boxer, and Ochoa, again, a little bit more open and loose and rangy with things. But
yeah, and Ochoa's got more power too. Like, Van's more punches and bunches. Ochoa's got more single punch power.
Yeah, I like that. I will no argument that the travel and the short turnaround are going to make this weight cut interesting, because he seems like a pretty big flyweight. He fought just 6 weeks ago. He's going to be traveling halfway across the world, but the heat, at the very least, for a guy that's gone from Peru to Brazil across the course of his career, he should be able to deal with it. Yeah, he should be all right. Just makes me think of the first time I was down in like the Rio Grande Valley, right on the Mexico border, and I talked to Vic Martinez, who was in the UFC for a couple fights, and he's been Diego Ferreira's second in command for years and years. And I just asked him, I was like, why do you think of everywhere, CDF moved to, McAllen, Texas when he left Brazil? And he's like, I'm pretty sure the weather reminded him of Manaus. I'm like, that's always stuck with me. I would love to see these two guys fight on a full camp, because here's the thing. I could see Ochoa just start blistering Almabayev out of the gate. I could see it looking a little bit like the Kopp fight, where Almabayev just looks out of his depth against a guy who's faster, harder hitting, and has reach on him, has good enough footwork that Almabayev is having trouble closing the distance and either getting in the phone booth to throw punches, or just get his hands on him, clinch, run him to the fence, and stop the tornado. I could see there being some of that, but because Ochoa is younger, less experienced, and fighting on a 6-week turnaround, like 2 weeks notice, halfway across the globe on a quick travel weight cut, what if he can only do that for 6 minutes? And Almabayev ends up just grinding him out late. So I'd love to see these two guys fight on a full camp. But this fight being what it is, that's actually what I'm predicting. I think Ochoa's going to give Almabayev everything he can handle and more in the early going here. I expect that Ochoa's going to win the first round, probably tag up Almabayev a lot. I'd say look out for some situations where Almabayev is trying the Mackenzie Dern takedown, just kind of bending at the waist and running right at Ochoa, trying to get at him and just getting the Matador routine done on him. But I think Ochoa probably will slow down. Almabayev will have the chance to take him into slightly deeper waters here. Almabayev, as the guy who's been training for a fight, training for this fight on this date in this place for 10 weeks now, is going to be better equipped to take over this fight in the second half of the second round, in the third round. Give me Almabayev by decision in a fight where, he loses the first round and kind of has to buckle down, dig deep, and get back in the win column. Next up on the UFC on ABC 9 prelims is a light heavyweight matchup between Ibo Aslan and Billy Elekana. Aslan, the 29-year-old from Turkey, is 14-2 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his first 2 fights in the UFC, both by knockout, before running into Iwan Cutelaba this February at UFC Fight Night Cejudo versus Song, where he got tapped out with an arm triangle choke in the first round. So he will look to bounce back from that loss, get back some of the momentum he had in a 6-fight win streak heading into the Cutelaba fight against Elekana. 30-year-old from California's San Bernardino County, 7-2 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. He fought back at UFC 311, making a short notice debut against Bogdan Guskov, whom we will be talking about a little later. He got guillotined late in the second round by the hulking Uzbekistani. He is looking for redemption in his first actual full camp official UFC fight. He is not favored to get it. Dane, Ibo Aslan is your favorite. What number does the line start with? Minus?
I'm going to say it's it's either high 1s or low 2s.
You're closer than Keith usually is. Aslan is minus 260, Elekana plus 215 as your underdog. So just a little bit wider line than you called, but not bad. Not bad at all. We'll quiz you more as the fight card wears along here. This is not quite Mohammad Yahya versus Stephen Nguyen, where we both kind of said these are both guys that may or may not be UFC material. I'm pretty sure that Ibo Aslan is going to be around the UFC for a bit. He's under 30 in a division where you can be 39 and still contribute. 2, he's from the Middle East. You know, he's from Turkey. UFC wants fighters they can stick onto these cards like that, but who can also probably fight in the US. But what I will say is that the Cutelaba fight showed what Aslan is going to need to work on if he wants to even stay a 500 fighter in the UFC light heavyweight division. Because he won his first 7 or 8 career fights all by knockout in a minute or less, I think. No, the one exception, he fought Robert Valentin, who not that great either, and that one got dragged into the third round. His only career loss before the Cutelaba fight was against Anton Turkalj, who had a cup of coffee in the UFC. And if you remember Anton Turkalj, Dane, I'm sure remembers him. If you're watching, you probably remember. Anton Turkalj was kind of a light heavyweight / heavyweight tweener who was a savvy grappler, but not much of an athlete, not much horsepower. And Turkalj navigated the minefield on the feet against Aslan with no problem in Brave CF, tapped him out in the second round. And that was Anton Turkalj. Aslan got back on the horse. He won those 6 fights in a row, including the rematch with Turkalj in his UFC debut. But then he ran into Iwan Cutelaba. Cutelaba, I'd have to ask Devin Tejada this, but he might be the most light heavyweight in the UFC in terms of guys that has elite level physical gifts and basement level fight IQ. He might actually be worse than Johnny Walker that way. If not, they're 1 and 2. But Cutelaba looked brilliant against Aslan because he just stepped in and bodied him. The difference in strength and physicality. Like, yes, Cutelaba is a physical hoss. Yes, he is a former Greco-Roman wrestler. But he has very rarely been able to look like one against UFC level light heavyweights. He did against Aslan. He made Aslan look out of his depth. He overpowered him easily, and on the ground, he made it look as though Aslan had not trained grappling defense a day in his life, even though he obviously definitely has. There's a difference between defending an arm triangle against, you know, your gym partners and against an Iwan Cutelaba guy that's trying to squeeze your head off of your shoulders. So we know what Aslan needs to do. he just needs to get in more reps against American style, big, strong, or Central European style, big, strong, light heavyweights. Elekana's not going to really provide that for him. Like Elekana, he's a smallish light heavyweight. He's a guy that I'm pretty sure early in his career, like I want to say his LFA debut was at 185. He's not a big light heavyweight, like not in terms of being long and having long reach, not in terms of being big and bulky and powerful like Kudalaba. He's a guy that wants a striking battle. He does throw punches in combination. He has decent snap on his punches. He clearly knows how to box, but he's just going to have at 205 limited opportunities to make that work for much the same reason as Aslan, only more so because he's smaller than Aslan, older, and not even as much of an athlete as Aslan is. Honestly, Elekana's fight against Bogdan Guskov in January had some of the same vibe as Aslan versus Kudalaba. Just Elekana was fighting a guy who was bigger, stronger, faster, just meaner and more of a bully. And because of that, Elekana could never get the fight at the range he wanted. Guskov was just constantly either crowding him, crushing the pocket, getting his hands on him, taking him down effortlessly, finished it with a nasty guillotine choke, but he was beating Elekana pretty much every which way by the point that happened. So I don't know if Elekana is going to have staying power in the UFC light heavyweight division. I hope that if he gets thrashed here, like I'm kind of guessing he's going to be, they give him one more chance and he drops to 185. Aslan, it's a wait and see. But I do think he gets past Elekana. The good news is that both of these guys are probably going to want this fight on the feet unless or until one of them gets hurt. But Aslan, as the guy who has better reach, is effective at a wider variety of ranges, because unless somebody's really pressing him, Aslan is decent in boxing range or at kicking range. I think he's going to piece Elekana up. And if Elekana does try to bring the fight to the ground, I think it won't be until too late. Give me Aslan by second round TKO here, and I think it'll be a pretty lopsided looking fight while it goes on.
So I always have this picture of Aslan as just this hulking dude with very little speed, just kind of almost like a Ion Kudalaba, just without any of the aggression, which is weird to say given that he's got all sorts of first round knockouts. But I just always picture him as just somebody who's hulking.
So kind of like that weird Marvel like side arc where like the Hulk had like Bruce Banner's mind still and was like like the gentle Hulk, like that.
Almost, yeah. Almost.
No, but nobody wants that, Dane.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But every time I look at the film, I'm like, okay, I've got to remember he is a much better athlete than what I actually think of. I just, for whatever reason, I think of him as just slow and plodding, when really he's not. I'm not saying that he's a superb athlete, but he's definitely more than adequate for light heavyweight, and he's definitely got the power for it. Yeah, I mean, for somebody to rack up the finishes that he has, you can't say that he doesn't have power. But I'm with you. I think that he's going to be around the UFC for a long time, but I think that his ceiling is pretty defined. I don't see him developing into a contender. I think that he's somebody who could, given the shallowness of light heavyweight, he could probably jump into the official UFC rankings, but I don't think he ever cracks the top 10. I think he hovers between 11 and 15. But at the same time, there's always a place for somebody like that in any division, if they can hang around there and provide entertaining fights. And that's, if you can rack up the highlight reel knockouts, yeah, the UFC will keep you around for a while. So Aslan's got that going for him. The funny thing is, between these two, I feel like in terms of just absolute natural gifts, Elekana's probably more gifted. He's more quick twitch athlete. I think he's a little bit more smoother on the ground. Not that we've seen him a lot on the ground. In fact, we saw him get subbed by Guskov, which is a terrible thing to say because Guskov, if you're getting subbed by Guskov, you've got problems. But I think that was more of a exhaustion submission because Elekana took that fight on very short notice. I think it was just a few days notice that he took that fight. So he went in there pretty much unprepared. And I think that he showed a lot of heart. I think he showed a lot of spirit. But he's just so unrefined. And I don't think that he's going to have the time to get refined within the UFC. Like if he were able to get experience on the regional scene for, we'll say, another 3 years. Nobody wants to spend a long time on the regional scene, and by then he'd be 33, but 33 is still relatively young at light heavyweight. But yeah, he's not where he needs to be in the UFC. Maybe he makes a bunch of strides in between camps or something like that. Cause I think he's got the stuff that he could hang around, but I don't think he's there yet. I don't think he has the time to catch up to where he needs to be. This is another one of those fights. Elekana's out in California, dry air. He's probably going to be used to the heat, but the humidity is going to be a problem for him. Aslan's used to this area. He's had some fights here. I think that he's custom made to get a win here. You said second round. I was thinking that, but just to be different, I'll say he gets Elekana out of there in the first knockout.
All right. Up next at UFC on ABC 9, and the card is still very much in flux, but this may end up being the top prelim. We'll see. Either way, it is a welterweight matchup between Muslim Salikhov and Carlos Leal. Salikhov, the 41-year-old from Dagestan, is 21-5 overall. He's 8-4 in the UFC, and he's on a 2-fight win streak, comprising his last 2 cage appearances of last year. He has yet to fight in 2025, but he fought most recently at UFC Fight Night, Jan versus Figueiredo. That was UFC Macau last November, where he spinning wheel kicked Song Kenan. Beautiful stuff from the then 40-year-old. He'll look to make it 3 straight at age 41. In order to do so, he's going to have to get past Leal. 31-year-old Brazilian is 22-6 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC, but that deserves a great big fat old asterisk next to it. He debuted in the UFC last October at UFC 308. He dropped a unanimous decision to Rinat Fakhretdinov, which went down, according to Sherdog and pretty much every other reputable combat sports outlet, as the robbery of the year for 2024. Most observers gave Leal all 3 rounds, and nobody had it worse than 29-28. It was a completely baffling decision, but he dusted himself off, came back at UFC 313 this March, and knocked out my good friend Alex Morono late in the first round. So he's looking to build on that momentum, wash the taste of that miserable decision loss further and further out of his mouth. He is comfortably favored to do so. Leal is -400, Salikhov +320. If you are enjoying this on the podcast platform of your choice rather than watching on YouTube, you just missed Dane Fox do his best impression of Keith's "what the hell is up with this line" look. Yeah, Leal, he might be the biggest favorite on the entire card without looking, but he's up there. 4-1 favorite against Salikhov. On one hand, I definitely understand why he is the favorite, because he is a full decade younger. He should be undefeated in the UFC. He just came off of an easy looking KO of a guy that even at this stage is not generally that easy and out, in the form of Morono. And meanwhile, Muslim Salikhov is 41 years old. When you're 41 years old and your fight style is spin and shit, it's not supposed to keep working at this level, but it does. Here's Salikhov. He is a Dagestani. You can tell by the hairline. He has the traditional Dagestani widow's peak. It must be a genetic thing. If you're a fan of this sport for more than a few years, you know that Dagestani fighters tend to come in 2 basic types. wrestlers who may or may not be able to strike, and strikers who can wrestle a little bit. Salikhov is a striker who can wrestle a little bit. Obviously, he's Dagestani. You can't even get to school in the morning without wrestling a bear. Salikhov, when pressed to it, is a pretty solid wrestler. However, he greatly prefers striking, and specifically and kind of uniquely, he prefers a wushu, sanda, kung fu style of fighting that, involves a wide side-on stance, lots of spinning stuff, lots of strikes from odd angles. It takes a special kind of balls to be, because here's the thing, he is a former wushu sanda world champ. It takes a special kind of balls to be a Russian guy, go win titles in China while calling yourself the king of kung fu. I applaud this. Like, that is some 80s pro wrestling heel shit right there. I love it. And just the fact that in his very last fight, he knocked out a Chinese guy in Macau with a spinning wheel kick is just like, that stirs my, like, the little Szechuan hot pot of my heart. Like, I love Muslim Salikhov. I'm going to be bummed when he's gone. It's like, he's the answer to what would it have been like if Alexander Shlemenko had shown up in the UFC, for 4 or 5 years. It's basically the same thing. The kind of short, somewhat undersized, not terribly athletic looking guy. Like, physique wise, these guys are both from like the Fedor Emelianenko school of physique, where they look short and almost a little dumpy for the division, but then there's, unlike Fedor, their striking style is all spinning shit. It's beautiful stuff. Leal, much more of a bread and butter striker, but he's a sharp one. He's definitely a Muay Thai type striker, and as Muay Thai type strikers go, he's not an Israel Adesanya in the Matrix fluid type guy. He's much more of a Alex Pereira, Carlos Ulberg, stand up straight, high guard. Defense is more like, you've watched Muay Thai before. Like, in Muay Thai fights, we'll get into a rhythm where it's not defense so much as waiting my turn to hit you. Where you'll just see 215-pound guys go whap, 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 whap. It's like, like watching a ping pong game without the ping pong ball. Just do. It's a little more of that, where there's defense, but it's more geared towards parrying things, rolling with things, than just having your opponent swing at air. That's been Leal's style. It's a very classic Brazilian doing Muay Thai style. He seems very effective at it, man. Like, I'm still just upset thinking about the decision loss against Rinat Fakhretdinov, because while it looks like I'm not on MMAdecisions.com for this one, I must not have been working that night. I remember scoring all 3 rounds for Leal, and a couple of them were like individually close, but one of them was not. So for Fakhretdinov to get at least 130-27 score his way was just absurd, to the point where I almost wonder if one or more of the judges had gotten the blue and red corners confused on their card. But against Fakhretdinov, that's not too far from what he's going to be facing in Salikhov. Like, Fakhretdinov isn't quite the same spinner, but he's got some similar tools on the feet, and like Salikhov, he has underrated wrestling that he's willing to turn to if it comes to it. Like, Fakhretdinov would much rather box you and throw in the occasional kick, but he's proven that he is willing and able to wrestle. In fact, his best success in their fight honestly came when he was trying to wrestle Leal. Then Alex Morono, just Leal was too fast, too accurate, hit too hard. That was it. I'm hemming and hawing here because, and right now, about 50 of our habitual viewers are already running for the comment section being like, as soon as Ben took a 5-second breath, we knew he was picking the upset. Because I am. I don't see why Leal is such a massive favorite here. And if a fight has a minus 400 favorite and I feel like it should be a pick'em or a near pick'em, I'm going with the underdog just on general principle. Give me Salikhov to win 2 rounds out of 3, and maybe it's even kind of a crummy or contentious decision, but give me Salikhov to win 2 rounds out of 3 in a fight that's difficult to score because neither guy settles into a very comfortable groove. I think Leal is going to have trouble kind of finding Salikhov in the early going. I think Salikhov at age 41, he's reached the point where he does start to slow down late in fights. So this could be one of those fights where we get a split decision or we get, who is it? I'm going to think of this name and just cut this pause out.
Almeida.
Oh, Almeida was definitely not the name I was thinking of.
I had to go that route because I already know where the comment section is going to go. But
it's a media guy who referred to it as an alternate decision when one fighter wins a unanimous decision, but the judges don't actually agree on any of the 3 rounds.
Okay. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, he's a guy in New York, but I cannot remember his name right now, and I think of him as kind of a friend, so I'm embarrassed. But yeah, give me Salikhov to pull off a pretty significant upset here in a kind of tense, tentative, awkward-looking fight where the rounds are individually difficult to score. I may not even agree with the decision as it's read out, but I'm feeling the upset here for Salikhov. And like I say, I'm picking Salikhov at least to make it a difficult fight to score. Yep.
So reason why I brought up Pendred is because I know you remember as well as I do, like, I don't know how the hell that guy had the successful UFC record he did, because he was able to, I don't know what, maybe he was greasing the judges because he was able to get some decisions.
The judges were going to sleep. The judges were falling asleep during Pendred fights.
But in this case, you got Carlos Leal returning to the Middle East to fight another Dagestani, very similar to what happened with Rinat Fakhretdinov. So, maybe people are, or I was going to say the comment section is going to be saying, oh, you're going in that direction because you expect the judges to once again do the same thing to Leal that they did last time and just completely screw him over. So that's why I brought up Pendred. And, like you said, you already know that the comment section was, with that 5-second pause or whatever. Yeah, they're going to be saying that as well, that, hey, another Dagestani getting greasing up the palms of the judges. I don't think that's actually what happened either, but, the odds are that you're going to get the occasional decision where 3 people sitting, like they talk about, you get a room full of monkeys on a bunch of typewriters, you'll eventually get the novel War and Peace. You're occasionally going to get the decision that everybody's saying, what the hell happened? So anyway,
so
you can see where you're coming
MMA, 500 MMA judges versus 1 gorilla.
Oh man. It's only been a couple of months since the internet world was having that debate, but oh man, that was fun. I can see where you're coming from. Salikhov is a slick striker, and when I say slick, I mean that he's not easy to figure out. If you give him the space, you give him the time, he's going to be able to piece you up, play hand games, all that fun stuff. If you give him the time to do what he wants to do, he's going to be tricky. And Leal, he can be a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. Sometimes he looks like an absolute world beater, and then other times you're wondering what the hell he's doing. He has a couple of losses to Sabadusi. I hope I said his name right. I always struggle with that.
Yep, you said it perfectly.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, thank you. uh, and in the controversial one, I felt like I'm not going to say it was the wrong decision, but Leal could have done more. Like I feel like that there was something missing from him, that he should have been able to get that upset, and it didn't happen. And I don't know. It's kind of I only rewatched that fight briefly, because I think it was Thursday that you told me that asked me to join on this, so I didn't have as much time as I wanted to be able to study up on this one, and that was the fight that was in my mind with regards to Leal. Like I know that I believe that he beat Fakhretdinov, so given my limited time, I didn't go back and rewatch that one. I did rewatch his fight with Morono. Sorry, buddy.
It's all right, man.
And even then, I didn't feel like Leal looked like he was at his best. Like I've seen what Leal can do in the PFL. I saw what he did with Fakhretdinov, and I thought that he looked better in those fights than he did against Morono. And so I feel like there's a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde with him. In terms of pure physical skills, he should beat Salikhov, but I don't know. I'll say that he does do what he should do to beat Salikhov, and that's pressure him. If you look at Salikhov's losses, he's lost to his first loss was Alex Garcia, bowling ball of a human being who pressured him, got him to the ground, beat the crap out of him. The next one was Li Jingliang. Li Jingliang's excellent at pressuring. Same with Nicholas Dalby, and Randy Brown just out athleted.
Brown just zapped him. Yeah, Brown might just be a better fighter. Yeah,
exactly. And when Leal's doing what Leal does best, is he is pressuring, and I think that's what he'll do with Salikhov. Like I said, I see the road to the upset, kind of like what you picked it. I don't blame you in some ways, and that's because I'm not positive that Leal is going to fight the smart fight. But if he does, and he is good at pressuring, I think that he should actually be able to handle Salikhov fairly easily. I see where the odds are, what they are, but I disagree with it. I think that they should be 2-1 at the widest. But yeah, I'm picking Leal. I'll say that he picks up a sloppy decision. Both of them kind of get tired down the stretch. Leal does more work in the first 2 rounds. Salikhov. No, Leal wins all 3 rounds. I think that age is going to start to play a factor as well with Salikhov, and his endurance is going to kind of falter down the stretch along with Leal. And so give me a 30-27 decision for Leal, but I'm not ripping on your upset pick at all. I can see where it happens, but
you are invited to rip on my upset picks anytime. By the way, the person I was thinking of that coined the term alternative decision, at least as far as I've been exposed to it, Scott Fontana from the New York Post, who among media people is one of the ones most interested in judging and officiating as a topic in the sport. It's like him, Luke Thomas, Sean Sheehan, people that clearly have that front of mind. So apologies, Scott, you're the man. Up next at UFC Abu Dhabi, and at least as the card is supposedly put together as of the beginning of fight week, the main card opener is a strawweight matchup between Amanda Ribas and Tabatha Ricci. Ribas, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 12-6 overall. She is 7-5 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Jungle Fight strawweight champ. She's 7-5 in the UFC. It's worth noting that she's 5-2 at strawweight. She has bounced back and forth between strawweight and flyweight. She is 2-3 at flyweight, 5-2 at strawweight. So here she will be fighting in her better weight class, but nonetheless, she's coming in on a 2-fight losing streak, the first losing streak of her entire career. She fought a little over a year ago in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 53, dropping a unanimous decision to Rose Namajunas. That was at flyweight. Then came back this January, and in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 249, she got tapped out by Mackenzie Dern late in the 3rd round. That was back at strawweight. She is staying at strawweight. She is looking again to break the first losing streak of her career. In order to do so, she will need to get past Ricci. 30-year-old Brazilian, 11-3 overall, 6-3 since joining the UFC as a standout in LFA. She's 6-3 in the UFC. She's 6-2 at strawweight. She made her debut in the UFC up a weight class against Mononfiore. That's obviously a pretty tall order. She lost, but since then she's been in her proper weight class and is 6-2. She is coming in off of a loss as well. She fought most recently at UFC Macau last November, like a lot of these fighters did, and she dropped a unanimous decision to Yan Xiaonan. Your favorite in this one, Dane, is minus 165. Underdog plus 130. Who do you think they are?
Let's say Ricci's the favorite.
It is actually Ribas. Amanda Ribas, minus 165. Tabatha Ricci, plus 130. Honestly, I found that a little puzzling myself. Like, I would have expected Ricci to be the favorite, but it is Ribas. This is an interesting fight to me. On one hand, I'm glad that Ribas is back down at strawweight. It's manifestly her better weight class. Again, she's an above 500 fighter in one weight class, below 500 in the other. But on the other hand, because I don't think she's probably a future title challenger in either division, I almost just want her to fight in the division where she's happier and more physically comfortable. Because the UFC's women's flyweight division is so depleted that Ribas could lose 3 of her next 4 there and still be fine as a likable fighter whose fights are usually interesting. I mean, look how long the UFC has held on to the ghost of Andrea Lee, just because she's a flyweight. They need a body that body has a face attached to it is great. But I mean, you know, she like 1-6 in her last 7 or something. But at 115, her versus Ricci, it's an interesting fight because I almost feel as though it's a bully versus bully matchup. I think of these two women as similar in some ways. Ribas, despite being one of the sweetest and most genial personalities in the entire UFC. Keith's running joke is that if you live next door to her, it would be like Snow White, where she has this sanctuary for like adorable lost animals that she's nursing back to health on her front lawn. I think Keith's dream is to live and have his neighbors be Amanda Ribas on one side and Stephen Thompson on the other, because Stephen Thompson would be like mowing your lawn for you, like when you're out of town, and Tabatha Ricci would just be like, you know, like showing you like the little cute birds that she's rescuing. At any rate, despite the fact that she is clearly an absolute sweetheart, she's kind of a bully as a fighter. She's a judo fighter who's more of a power puncher than a refined kickboxer. I'm not saying that she has massive power, but just like she's more of just a hard hitter than a refined kickboxer. She does best when she's the better athlete, when she's the better wrestler, when she's the stronger woman. Like she's a bully as a fighter. And Ricci is that taken to an extreme. Like she's short, small, compact for strawweight, but she's a tank. She's not quite Jessica Andrade, but she might be like Claudia Gadelha. I think that might be a better comparison, where not quite the compact ball of muscle, but still a compact muscled woman for the division that is an explosive athlete. Ricci looks like she should hit like a ton of bricks, but either just because she doesn't have that particular gift or she hasn't refined her striking technique to that level. Despite looking like she's swinging really hard, she doesn't have massive striking power. She is at her best, again, when she can get both hands on the other woman, find a way to wrestle her down to the ground, pelt her with some ground and pound, and hopefully lock up a submission, or at least just do enough damage, stay busy enough that she stays on top and she wins a decision that way. I know she is trained and trains as a Muay Thai striker, but I think her striking is rudimentary. She is short and has short reach, and unlike some fighters, unlike say Miranda Maverick, Ricci kind of struggles when she's fighting a woman who's taller, has better range, and knows how to use it. She struggled against Yan Xiaonan in a fight like that. even in wins over people like Poliana Viana and Jessica Penne, like you could tell that it was a little daunting for her to just navigate the reach of a much taller woman. For those reasons, I think this is a pretty evenly matched fight, and I'm waiting for the weight cut to tell on Amanda Ribas and for her to just look flat and miserable and have no gas tank at 115. But assuming that doesn't happen, I do favor her in this fight. She's taller than Ricci. She has better reach. She has better power on a single shot for single shot basis. And most importantly, what I think this whole fight really hinges on is I think Ribas is the one who will get to decide where this fight takes place. You know, bully versus bully, it tends to come down to who gets to determine where the fight happens. And if Ribas wants this fight standing, I don't think Ricci can take her down, at least not easily. Whereas if Ribas wants the fight down, I think she's going to be able to get it there. So give me Ribas to win at least 2 rounds out of 3 and maybe get a chance to flex her striking arsenal a little bit. She's been flashing a little bit more of a kicking game recently. She should. She's especially for strawweight. She's fairly tall. You know, I could see her flicking out some high kicks, you know, kicking to the body on Ricci. Always cautious of getting her kicks caught and getting tossed to the ground. But give me Ribas to look really good here and pick up a unanimous decision over Ricci in a pretty fun, fast-paced women's strawweight fight.
I think that there's one person that you forgot in Keith's fantasy neighborhood. You know, he's got to have Sage Northcutt down the street as well. You know, probably has a lemonade stand.
It's now like now that Sage Northcutt has known the gentling touch of a woman. I don't know. It might be some like hard lemonade at that stand. I don't know. Like maybe it's going to be like the, you know, Return of the Jedi Skywalker, where he's still kind of a Boy Scout, but at least he's got like the black cloak on and stuff. And we'll see. I've interviewed Sage Northcutt, and what I will say for him is this: it's not an act. You can tell when somebody really is that guy. He really is that guy. Like every time he called me sir, I looked over my shoulder for my dad, even though my dad's been dead for like 25 years. Like a genuinely like just good dude. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the best way that I could describe Sage Northcutt, if they didn't know who he was, is a clean-cut Spicoli. That might be over the head of people who are unfamiliar with Fast Times, but yeah.
Oh, absolutely. No, clean-cut Spicoli, like Vacation Bible School version of Spicoli. Yeah. Absolutely, because you know Spicoli, he wasn't dumb, but he just had that sort of laid back, like, hey man, everything's okay, it's cool, you know, just kind of, you know, the surfer stoner vibe. And yeah, Sage has a little bit of that without being a surfer or a stoner. At least I don't think he's a surfer. He's from Houston, like, you know, it's like from 30 miles away from me here. But yeah, really good dude.
This fight, oh god. Now that we've got that aside taken care of, this one is one of the harder fights to pick. You know, the opener between Grant and Blackshear was probably the hardest one for me, but this one's very close, and a lot of it just has to do with one factor, and that's the headspace of Ribas. She seems like, obviously people thrive on confidence, but some people have that confidence no matter what, and some of them struggle to hold on to that. And I remember an interview a while ago where Ribas talked about how much she struggled with the knockout to Marina Rodriguez. It took her a little while to make her way back from that. And at this point, Ribas is on the first losing streak of her career. You know, one of them was to Rose Namajunas. She was expected to lose that. The other one was to, who was it? Mackenzie Dern. Sorry, I just had my daughter come in here. And the Dern fight was...
It's because her favorite fighter is Amanda Ribas.
Dude, Amanda Ribas is everybody's favorite fighter. And with Dern, that was an opponent that she had beaten before. And I think a lot of people were expecting her to kind of do the same thing to Dern that she had done before, because it's not like Dern has really progressed on the feet. So the fact that Ribas was unable to get that rematch, I think that she just kind of, I'm worried that her confidence is completely shaken at this point. Otherwise, I 100% agree with you. She's got the better striking technique. I remember what she did with that jab to Dern in that first fight, and that has never left my mind. That's always something that comes immediately to the forefront of my analysis of her, is that if she can get her jab going, she is very difficult to deal with on the feet. And Ricci is very rudimentary on the feet. She's got I believe her boyfriend is a professional boxer, and in all honesty, I almost think that's a disservice to her on the feet, because he's a boxer. He's not an MMA fighter, and I think a lot of times when people start training exclusively with boxers, there's a lot of aspects that they end up neglecting within their striking. Don't get me wrong, they can develop some nice looking technique on the feet and whatnot, but there's a lot more strategy to MMA striking.
And Ricci with a kicking game, Ricci with a diverse kicking game would be scary.
Yes, exactly. And I think the fact that she's with him is hurting her in that sense. What I do like about Ricci is that she does seem to be unshakable. Like I haven't seen a moment where it seems like she's quit on herself or the fight or anything like that. She's just she's a bulldog in that sense. Not quite the Jessica Andrade bulldog like you were insinuating, but she just keeps coming forth and she's unshakable. And if Ribas is having any sort of confidence issues, and given it isn't just that she lost to Dern, she didn't look like herself in that fight. I felt like she looked a little bit more shop worn, and she's only 31, but she's been a professional fighter for over a decade at this point. Ricci has as well, but Ricci also, her career started out a little bit more slowly. She was focusing more on grappling, and I'm not going to say that grappling doesn't take a toll on you, but MMA is a much more physically destructive sport. So Ribas should win this if both of these guys were if both of these girls were in their prime. But I hate to say it, but I feel like Ribas, we might have already seen the best version of her, despite the fact she's only 31. I hope I'm wrong. That's not necessarily me saying that I hope she wins this fight. Well, okay, maybe I am saying that. Amanda Ribas is a sweetheart. I just want to see the best of both versions. Obviously you want to see that in both fights, but at the same time, you got to try to deal with what you believe the reality is. And with Ribas, I don't think that she's there anymore. So it's not a massive upset by any means, but I'll say that Ricci's just dogged determinedness. There we go. I finally got it out. Reflects better to the judges, and she's able to get 2 out of the 3 rounds on the scorecards.
All right. Before we move on to the next fight, just real quick, my favorite Sage Northcutt anecdote. And this was, 6 or 7 years ago at this point. He was probably like 21 or 22 at the time. But he posted a picture on his Instagram of him just on some random Saturday, like washing his truck. He's from Houston. He's got a big old truck. He's washing. He's just wearing nothing but shorts and flip-flops. If you're watching this, you probably can picture Sage Northcutt. He has arguably the greatest physique in MMA history. It's like him or prime Kevin Randleman for the one that looks most like a comic book character. And some female fighter, either in the UFC or Invicta, like a pretty well-known fighter, and I won't even try to guess who it is, but it was someone who's pretty well-known and kind of attractive, was like, commented, "Ooh, me next." His response was, "You have a truck?" If it was anybody else on the entire planet, I would have assumed they were joking. But yeah, Sage Northcutt 100% thought that girl was asking if he would wash her truck for her.
Oh,
what a blessing that man is.
Yes, I 100% agree.
So, in between the section for the last fight and this fight. We took a quick break here, and I went and refilled my drink, went and used the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror as I'm washing my hands, realized that I'm wearing a t-shirt from a Utah craft brewery. So, shout out to Grid City Beer Works of Salt Lake City. And I just, apparently it's a Utah weekend for me. I need one of those every couple of years. Next up on the UFC Abu Dhabi main card is a 205-pound matchup between Nikita Krylov and Bogdan Guskov. Krylov, the 33-year-old Ukrainian by way of Russia, is 30-10 overall. He is 11-8 across two separate stints in the UFC. He had an early run over a decade ago at this point, part at heavyweight, part at light heavyweight, was let go, went and won some fights in Fight Nights Global. Since returning, he is 5-5, and he is coming in off a loss. He fought at UFC 314 back in April, where he got knocked out in like 2 minutes by Dominic Reyes. That snapped a 3-fight win streak for Krylov. He will look to get back in the win column, prove that he is still that his best days are still ahead of him at age 33 against Guskov. 32-year-old from Uzbekistan is 17-3 overall. He is 3-1 in the UFC. And since dropping his UFC debut to Volkan Oezdemir almost 2 years ago, he has rattled off 3 straight finishes inside of 2 rounds against Zach Pauga, Ryan Spann, and Billy Elekana. The most recent of those, the Elekana fight, was back in January at UFC 311, where he took the short notice opponent Elekana and largely dominated him on the way to a second round guillotine choke submission. So he's looking for his 4th straight win in the UFC here against a veteran in Krylov. Odds on this one do favor Krylov. He is minus 190, Guskov plus 160 as your underdog. Nikita Krylov is he is about as light heavyweight as a fighter gets. I just said that about Iwan Kudalaba, but Krylov is cut from very much the same cloth, where he has outstanding physical gifts. He was a very big guy for the standards of the division in 2012 or whenever it was, and he landed in the UFC as like a 21-year-old undersized heavyweight. He's still pretty good size for the division. Like, he's 6'3", so on a tail of the tape, you don't think you're dealing with a Johnny Walker type, but he has a big wingspan. He has a good amount of muscle on his frame, long legs, and he is an explosive athlete. He's fast, fluid, powerful, hits like a ton of bricks. So a gifted fighter who, through a mix of defensive lapses and just horrible moments of fight IQ, just horrible tactical blunders, is barely above 500 in the UFC. And the funny thing is, he has been, by the optics, a better fighter since he's been back. But since he's been back, he's literally a 500 fighter in the UFC. He is 5-5. Just here's, I need. I feel as though, and shout out to our friend Devin Tejada for just calling light heavyweight the low fight IQ division. It's where even all the way up to the top 5, the top 3, you're getting fighters who are incredibly gifted, incredibly skilled, but just prone to making gigantic blunders or just coming in with weird game plans and just laying a complete egg. It's only at 205 pounds is Yuri Prochazka a perennial factor in the title picture. Like, I love Yuri Prochazka. He's fucking awesome. He is a shoo-in for the Hall of fucking Awesome if he retires without a UFC title. But at any weight class from 135 to 170, a guy with that kamikaze style and those defensive blunders would not get within sniffing distance of the top 10.
He's already got a title, though.
What, the Ryzen title? He's had that's right. He's had the UFC title. Duh. Yeah, of course.
He beat Glover.
He beat Glover. Yeah. So disqualified from the Hall of Fucking Awesome, but he is nonetheless fucking awesome. Only at 205 pounds does Anthony Smith, as shop-worn as he was for those last couple of years, keep on snaring a borderline top 15 guy about every third or fourth fight. Because only at light heavyweight would he have opponents that would just make that big a mistake, like every couple fights. That's just the nature of the division. And Krylov has been a poster boy for it for literally a decade now. Probably longer than anyone else who's been in the division. That makes me nervous thinking about him as an almost 2-1 favorite over Guskov, because for a fighter like Johnny Walker, like Nikita Krylov, like Iwan Kudalaba, any of the light heavyweight wild men, the real kryptonite is just an opponent who knows what he wants to do and has a reasonably good game plan and sticks to it. And whatever else you may say about him, Guskov is clearly a guy that knows his strengths and limitations. He's not a titanic light heavyweight, but he's a big dude. He's a muscular guy. Like, he and Krylov probably weigh about the same outside of camp, even if he's like shorter and more compact. And I thought it was ironic that his UFC debut was against Volkan Oezdemir, because I thought of him as kind of topping out as a poor man's Oezdemir, where Oezdemir had this reputation as a kickboxer and actually had some kickboxing fights, but he was just very much a bread and butter 1-2 leg kick guy at a UFC level, and just kind of stiff, basic repertoire of strikes, but just threw him with a ton of power on him. Like, that's Volkan Oezdemir to me. Guskov feels kind of the same way. He marches forward. He knows what he's good at, throwing a couple of basic strikes in basic combination really hard, but puts himself in the best position to win by getting that power onto his opponent's face. He also clearly has at least the rudiments of a submission game. His guillotine on Elekana was nice. I don't think that's going to come out very often at the UFC level, but because of that, even though I think Krylov is more skilled, I think he's more athletic, and I think in a vacuum, like if you put him up against the punch meter at Dave & Buster's, Krylov might even hit harder on a shot-for-shot basis. I think it's much more likely that Guskov actually gets the knockout, because Guskov is a guy that's going to come forward and just, again, stick to his bread and butter game plan. The thing I hate about predicting light heavyweight fights is if you're wrong, you tend to be all the way wrong and look like a complete moron. I'm going with the upset here, and I'm picking Guskov, which makes me sad because I always secretly kind of like wish Krylov well. And Krylov may make me look silly. If he decides he wants to head kick Bogdan Guskov, this fight might be over in 45 seconds. But also, if he decides he wants to head kick Guskov, he might come out, try 15 head kicks in the first round and gas himself out and get guillotined in the second round. Like, I'm going with Guskov, and if I pick Guskov based on his track record, there's no reason to think this goes to a decision, especially considering he's not taking on a very durable foe. So I'm taking Guskov by first round knockout here. I'm not terribly comfortable or not terribly confident with it, and my second most likely outcome is probably Krylov by first round knockout, but give me Guskov in the upset. I think he marches forward, probably eats a kick or two, but gets inside the range of the much rangier Krylov, mugs him. This thing is over in like one big overhand and then like a hail of hockey uppercuts against the fence. Krylov melts, ref jumps in, fight's over, first round.
On the side with Krylov, very few fighters have had memorable first three fights in the UFC. His first fight was the one with Paleli, where it was so bad that it was good. Oh my gosh, that was such a terrible fight.
And that was back when his Sherdog Fight Finder photo had him in a trench coat and a fedora, the Fighting Al Capone, wearing UFC gloves, even though he was not in the UFC yet when that photo was taken. It was the most former Soviet Republic MMA thing ever. Like, it was so good. I remember it well. That's probably why I still like Krylov. Yeah.
No, I'm 100% with you. That was the first time I saw that. I'm like, oh, dude, this guy is badass. And then that Paleli fight start, you see that, and I still kind of thought he was badass, but it was for different reasons. And then he has that follow, and you were basically referencing it because the second fight was Walt Harris, and he just lambasted him with head kick after head kick after head kick. Like if you haven't seen that, yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, if you haven't seen that fight, it's literally like 30 seconds. Go watch it. You can catch it, and yeah, that's literally what it is: head kick, head kick, head kick. And then his third fight, he is the reason why Ovin St. Preux ended up becoming Ovin Bon Preux.
Yep, he is the first guy to get shoulder choked by Ovin St. Preux, and if you've never seen that fight, if you haven't seen it in 10 years, go back and watch it, because Ovin St. Preux eventually developed setups for his Von Flue choke, but that was just idiot holding onto a guillotine for too long, not realizing that his carotid's being pressed and he's about to go out. Because the thing about the Von Flue choke is, if you haven't had it done to you, you don't realize that you're about to pass out. It's a thing of beauty. Man, thank you for renewing my appreciation for Nikita Krylov. Like, what a treasure.
Yeah, like I said, those three fights, like most fighters, you can't remember their first three fights a lot of times when they're just kind of a little nobody coming up out of nowhere, unless they've had an absolutely explosive debut. He just had a crap fight, one that kind of catches your attention because head kick after head kick after head kick, and then that's God bless Nikita Krylov. Anyway, I'm with you in the sense that I have an appreciation for Krylov, just because for the longest time you were guaranteed to have an exciting fight with him, or at least an entertaining one, because he was going to do something stupid or he was going to do something just incredibly entertaining, no matter what. And you talk about his having a 500 record upon his return, which is absolutely true. But the deal with that 500 record is, if you take a look at who he's been losing to, let's see here. Blachowicz, at that point, future champion. Teixeira, future champion. Ankalaev, future champion. Paul Craig, who he challenges Michael Johnson for having the most up and down record. Johnson has wins over the likes of Poirier and Ferguson, and then losses to Paul Sass and you were talking about it last time, Reza Madadi.
Yeah.
Craig is like that. He's got wins over the likes of Ankalaev and Jamal Hill. So as much as you want to say a loss to Paul Craig is a bad loss, I'm not going to crap on it too much. And then a loss to Dominic Reyes. Yeah. You might say post-prime Dominic Reyes, but regardless, Reyes has been looking good lately. I'll leave
the resurgent Dominic Reyes, who seems to be a man of destiny now. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not like he's losing to bums, Krylov's losses since he returned to the UFC have been to decent opposition, better than decent opposition, I should say. And for the most part, he has actually been looking a lot smarter, we'll say. He's been utilizing a lot more wrestling. He hasn't been as reckless in his defense. His win over Johnny Walker, like if you think of the two most light heavyweights in the light heavyweight division, you would think that it was Krylov and Johnny Walker, and Krylov just put forth a straightforward wrestling game plan and cleanly beat Walker. It was actually even pretty boring. So we know that Krylov has it in him to be able to execute a game plan. It's just he's still Nikita Krylov, so we can't trust him to do that. Regardless, Krylov is by far the superior wrestler here. You know, like you said, with Guskov, he's got his game plan, and that's just to go forward, swinging basic combinations. And at some point, he'll try to put some heat on you and try to get you out of there pretty quickly. Krylov of old would do that in the past. He hasn't been as prone to do that in the future. He's been a lot more, or he has tried to be a lot more careful with what he does, because that the loss to Reyes, I believe, was preceded by a 3-fight win streak. So he was starting to put forth some consistency, starting to look good. And it feels weird to say it with Krylov, you know, saying that him getting sloppy and getting knocked out is the aberration in this case. But prior to that, he was showing a great fight IQ for light heavyweight. I'm not saying that he was out there pulling Randy Couture game plans by any means, but he was utilizing the tools that he had, playing with his strengths against his opponent's weaknesses, and I think that's something that he's trying to continue to do that. You know, I don't know what happened with Reyes. Maybe it was the fact that he had a 2-year layoff or something like that in between those fights. But even in terms of physical gifts, he's superior to Guskov. I think the only real advantage that Guskov has is power. And I'm not going to say that your upset pick is completely off the wall, because it's Nikita Krylov. You know, you could put him in there with a UFC debutant, and I wouldn't be surprised if Krylov ended up blowing that. But I think Krylov's going to try to play it safe. I think that this is going to be a boring fight. For entertainment's sake, I hope it's not. I hope that, you know, we get a classic Krylov fight. But I think he's going to try to play it safe. He's not necessarily old for the light heavyweight division, but he also started his career really young. You know, he's 40 fights in. I think that he recognizes that if he's going to make a run, he's got to start doing that now, and he's got to play to his strengths against somebody like Guskov, and that involves just taking him to the ground, keeping him down there as much as possible. I was going to say a decision, but I'm not confident in Guskov's ground game. I mean, he was subbed out by Volkan Ozdemir, so I'll say that Krylov gets a second-round submission.
All right. Disagreement? 3 fights in a row. I don't know if Keith and I have ever done that, so we will see how this plays out. If you're right on all of them, we'll definitely at least have you guest on the recap so you can come get your flowers. Next up on the UFC Abu Dhabi main card is a middleweight matchup between Sharabutdin Magomedov and Marc-Andre Barriault. Magomedov, the 31-year-old Dagestani, is 15-1 overall. He's 4-1 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that the one loss came in his last fight. He fought at UFC Fight Night Adesanya versus Almabayev back in February and dropped a unanimous decision to Michael Venom Page. Prior to that, he had looked largely dominant in winning his first 4 UFC bouts, most recently knocking out Armen Petrosyan with a spinning back fist last October at UFC 308. So one of the more intriguing, notorious, talked about up-and-comers in the UFC, looking to get back in the win column here. In order to do so, he will have to deal with Barriault. 35-year-old Quebecois is 17-9 with 1 no contest overall. He is 6-8 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ from Canada's TKO promotion. He was their middleweight as well as light heavyweight champ since joining the UFC. Again, mixed results, but for what it's worth, he is coming in off a win. He knocked out Bruno Silva in just 90 seconds back in May at UFC 315. That snapped a 3-fight losing streak for him, spanning all 3 of his cage appearances of 2024. So this year, already off to a better start for Barriault. He would love nothing better than to double down by pulling off one of the bigger upsets in the UFC this year. And that's what it would be, because Magomedov is minus 600, Barriault plus 425 coming back. Generally speaking, when someone is, again, that big a favorite, that big an underdog, I pull back on general principle. I've been watching this sport for a long time. You've been watching this sport for a long time. Individual sports are always more subject to chaos than team sports. You know, one person stubbing their toe 3 days out from a football game rarely affects it that much. One person stubbing their toe 3 days out from a fight can affect it a lot. Add to that there's a minimal yet constantly evolving rule set and unreliable judging, and yeah, always dangerous to take a huge favorite in MMA. You are probably familiar with, our viewers are definitely familiar with my procedure. Whenever I see a fight where the favorite is 4-1 or greater, I will usually start from the inverse proposition and just ask myself, okay, if this upset happens, what does it look like? And here's the thing. Marc-Andre Barriault is 6-8 with 1 no contest in the UFC. But of those 6 wins, almost all of them have come against people more physically gifted than him. I'm sure power bar sounds better in French, but the whole idea of being a guy that has to go through some fire, weather a storm, grind down an opponent, wear them down, hurt them, maybe finish them late. That's his game. It doesn't run on fast twitch athleticism so much as it runs on durability, determination, physical strength. He definitely has that. He had it at 205 in TKO. He definitely has it at 185. If he can get his hands on somebody, he's almost always the stronger guy in the clinch. It's visible when he's sort of mauling and mashing people against the cage. It's not a 1-to-1 comparison because the guy I'm about to compare him to is also very athletic in other ways, but just the kind of strength he exhibits when he gets his hands on people, he is against the cage what Derek Brunson always would look like wrestling people in space. Just, it's like, oh, you guys look about the same size, but one of you is ragdolling the other. That's a little bit of what Barriault brings, especially once his opponent starts to get tired. So I can see in my head what the upset would look like, but the upset would involve him surviving round 1 Sharabutdin, and that's what I'm concerned about, because Barriault's fight style means that win or lose, he has taken a ton of damage in his fights. And there are plenty of fighters like that. A lot of Keith's and my favorites are from that school, your Darren Elkins types, but trying to be Darren Elkins at 185, 205, 265 pounds is a much different and more dangerous proposition. Like, Barriault, he throws some pretty crisp punching combinations. He doesn't have the fastest hand speed, but he makes up for that a little bit by throwing combinations. Like, if the other guy, has faster hands than you, one way you can kind of make up for that is by throwing 3 punches in a row. But he's slow-footed. He doesn't have great head movement. He is just going to be a heavy bag for Sharabutdin. That's really what it boils down to. Shara Magomedov, the tail of the tape doesn't really convey kind of how tall and long he fights. You see, okay, 6'2", 185. You look at the tail of the tape on his wingspan. You're not expecting a John Jones or Israel Adesanya silhouette in the cage, but it is kind of like an Israel Adesanya thing where it's not just the speed of his hands or the dexterity of his kicks, but he's hitting people hard at ranges that they're not expecting him to be able to tag him at. I'm a Sharabutdin detractor for the most part. I think he's been largely sheltered. I think he's outside of the cage seems to be a pretty questionable person. Inside the cage, if the guy can't get a visa to fight any place where the UFC can reliably put on pay-per-views, I do kind of ask myself what this all is other than like a weird set of exhibitions. But I'm not going to fool myself about what he's good at. Just, yeah. Incredibly fast, fluid athlete, good natural power on his shots, incredible leg dexterity. Like, so some of the best dexterity as far as kicks go, like this side of, well, hell, Michael Venom Page, the guy he just fought, or Stephen Thompson, only in a younger, bigger, naturally stronger guy. And then on top of that, his punches are nothing to sneeze at either. It's kind of like Crow Cop, where his kicks were such the part of the highlight reel that you could lose track of just what just incredible, beautiful straight punches he had with like just so little telegraphing. Magomedov is a fantastic offensive kickboxer. He is not as porous a defensive wrestler as I thought he might have been. So even if Barriault just kind of sells out and is like, okay, I'm going to have to take 2 or 3 clean shots, but I've got to get my hands on this fast, crazy dude so I can stay in range, get him on the ground and try to do some work there. I don't even think that's going to work. I think if he does that, it may actually look like, well, Brunson versus Robert Whittaker that we're going to talk about in a little while here, where he's just going to be running in straight lines at a guy that's using lateral movement, sniping him as he runs by, catching him with clean counters, and just like basically punching him down out of midair. I do think Magomedov is going to wreck Barriault here. Give me Sharabutdin by first round KO. Probably say some outrageous things through a translator, and we'll hear, about what a scary guy he is and how we would beat Dricus du Plessis.
Yeah. I don't have to say a whole lot with regards to this. I think that you put it perfectly. I'll throw out there who it is that Sharabutdin has beaten. Let's see here. Bruno Silva, Antonio Trocoli, Michal Alexejczuk, and Armin Petrosian. He beat all of them, and aside from probably Trocoli, I think that Barriault is probably more tailor-made for him to beat. He's a plotting middleweight. He's going to have to catch Shara, and Shara's not easy to catch. So, yeah, this isn't going to go well. The type of you mentioned already who it was that Magomedov did lose to, Michael Page, and that's because Shara could not deal with the athleticism. Barriault is nowhere near the athlete that Michael Page is. Like they're not on different levels; they're on different planets. This is the UFC is trying to get Magomedov back on track. This is obviously a gimme fight for him. And a lot of it just merely has to do with the fact that Styles makes fights. And yeah, this is tailor-made for Magomedov to get an easy win. It's going to be a knockout. The question for, I'll say first, Barriault's got the, you already mentioned he takes a lot of damage. And I think his chin's beginning to fade. So I don't think it's going to take too much for Magomedov to get him out. So first round knockout.
Next up at UFC on ABC 9, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, third from the top, is a bantamweight matchup between Bryce Mitchell and Said Nurmagomedov. Mitchell, the 30-year-old Arkansan, is 17-3 overall. He's 8-3 since joining the UFC out of season 27 of The Ultimate Fighter. While he is 8-3 in the UFC, he is 0-0 at bantamweight. All of his exploits in the UFC so far, for better or for worse, mostly for better, have been at 145 pounds. After alternating wins and losses over his last 6 fights, he has decided to move down to the bantamweight division, and waiting to greet him there will be Nurmagomedov. 33-year-old Dagestani is 18-4 overall. He is 7-3 in the UFC. He is coming in off a loss. He fought most recently back at UFC Fight Night Adesanya versus Imavov back in February, where he lost a unanimous decision to Vinicius Oliveira. He'll be looking to bounce back from that. I'll quiz you on this one. Dane, the favorite is minus 125. The underdog just barely in the plus money at plus 105. Who are they?
Saeed the favorite?
It's actually Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell minus 125. Saeed Nurmagomedov plus 105. I'll go ahead and flip this one to you first. Question, I mean, the obvious question is, who do you think is going to win and what does the fight look like? But are you at all surprised that Mitchell is moving to bantamweight? And in advance of this fight, not knowing whether he's going to win or not, do you think it's a good decision? Go.
I think that it's worth trying. Like, I don't know how it's going to work out, but he does often seem to be undersized. Undersized is a weird thing to say. Overpowered is a better way to put it, because he's got a long and lanky frame. Even at featherweight, he's going to be very long and lanky at bantamweight. But despite his incredible grappling instincts, because a lot of what he does really just comes across as instinctual to me. You know, he does a lot of things that we'll say have a little bit of funk on him, but he's able to get away with it. He knows what he's doing down there in a manner that you can't teach. So he's very dangerous in that way. The big problem that he has right now is he's proven his stupidity. Like, for a long time, Mitchell was fairly lovable because he was saying some stupid things and just flaunting his personality, you know, throwing out the camo shorts and all that fun stuff. And then he's really wrecked it to, you know, saying one of the stupidest things he ever could have possibly said. I don't need to repeat it. It's not going to take a long Google search, but he's made himself a lovable goofball into one of the guys that you're reluctant to want to root for him. Like, I hesitate to say that it was out of ignorance, because I don't know how you can be ignorant about that. But so I'm throwing out there that there probably is a bias out there at this point. You know, I think a lot of people are probably rooting against him, and I might have a little bit of that in my analysis here as well. Anyway, I think that the weight drop is worth trying. He was easily outmuscled by Topuria. Who else was it that who else has he lost to? Give me a second.
I mean, John Silva tapped him out, and Josh Emmett just clocked him. Like, Josh Emmett punched a year off his life, at least professionally.
And then Elia as well. Okay, so yeah, but Elia is going to overpower anybody. And the thing is, what's even funnier, we all know that if you're going to drop weight and be the bully, that, you know, it helps if you're a good wrestler or a grappler. So in that sense, it totally plays into what he does well. His striking is still incredibly rudimentary, despite being in the UFC for 6 or 7 years at this point. I'm not going to say that there hasn't been progress. There has been, but it's still not very good. And to his credit, at least he knows that, and he uses his striking to try to set up his takedowns. Saeed's kind of a weird fighter as well. He's really good at a lot of things that you typically would say that you don't need to be great about at this. You know, like, a lot of times foundation is being a good boxer in the pocket, because a lot of times that's where the fight ends up. You're boxing in the pocket, you know, maybe you throw a kick, but he's good at things that, like, timing spinning kicks or being opportunistic with his submissions. You know, that guillotine that he snatched on Saeed Jacob Kakramanov. His name sucks. I hate trying to say his name. But yeah,
thanks to Magomedov, you don't have to anymore. So
no kidding. But yeah, no, he was getting shit kicked in that fight before he was able to nab that submission. I feel like the basic sinews that make a fighter really good are the things that Nurmagomedov is kind of lacking in the most. But in some weird way, he actually makes it work. You talk about it being a requisite for any Dagestani to wrestle a bear on their way to school. Saeed wasn't wrestling bears. I don't know. Maybe he was wrestling goats or something like that, but it certainly wasn't bears. Because he's a Nurmagomedov in name and in name only, because he's not the Muller in the wrestling department. But he is very, very tricky on the ground. I think that he's probably a more refined grappler. He's not going to bully his opponents on there, but he's crafty on there. But I don't think that he's on the same level as Bryce. I really want to pick Nurmagomedov in an upset, but I do think that Bryce is his instinctual grappling, I think, is probably going to be better if the weight drop goes as I think it's going to go. That's still very much a wild card. By all reports, he's saying that he's feeling good dropping down. I admit that's what fighters tend to say every time they're making the weight cut, at least initially. On the back end, they might say something else, but initially they'll always say that it's going great. But I think that he's the type of person that if it's going shitty, he'll let you know. I mean, given what he said, yeah, he'll for better or worse, he'll speak what's on his mind.
If you had shredded your nutsack with a power drill, would you tell people about it?
Hell no. I hate to say it, but that was one of those things that I kind of found charming. I'm like, oh, this guy's kind of dumb. It's funny, but yeah.
Like he's a real one. Whatever else you may say, he's a real one.
Yes, 100% true. So yeah, I do believe that Saeed is crafty enough on the ground that he can survive whatever Bryce throws to him on the mat. But I'll say it'll be a close fight. Bryce takes 2 rounds, 29-28 decision.
Yeah, this is an interesting experiment. Normally, I'm not somebody that advocates fighters dropping in weight unless their problems in their old weight class were ones that could clearly be attributed to the size differential. I don't know if that's Mitchell's real problem at 145 pounds. We throw the Topuria fight completely out the window. Topuria has annihilated everybody that he's fought, essentially. So yeah, and the worst possible skill set to go at Topuria with is your best chance to win is to sub him. Ugh.
Ask Ryan Hall, right?
Yeah, exactly. So throw that completely out. And I mean, I'm not here to make excuses for Bryce Mitchell's defeats, but falling victim to Josh Emmett's first one-punch knockout in probably a full decade, it's, on the one hand, if Emmett and Mitchell fought 10 times, I don't know if Mitchell wins 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 8 out of 10, but I think he only gets cold cocked with a single punch 1 time out of 10. So, like, it's concerning because, yeah, Mitchell has striking defense issues that he's never really fully resolved. He's, doesn't move his head enough, doesn't bring his hands all the way back up after throwing strikes, hangs out in the pocket too long before eggs. Like, he's got issues. There's a reason that a very old shop-worn Josh Emmett was able to land a perfect punch on him. The Silva fight kind of reminded me of the Topuria fight because, again, Mitchell was taking on a guy that could deal with him on the ground just fine if he needed to, at least for limited amounts of time under limited circumstances, but was also stronger, faster, and a harder hitter and a much more polished striker. Like, the problem for Mitchell was that Topuria was better everywhere. and there was no safe place, no feasible route to victory for Mitchell. And with Silva, it turned into a similar thing. Like once they met in the middle of the octagon and got their hands on each other, just you put it well. Like Mitchell doesn't look undersized at 145 necessarily, but too many guys have just been too physically strong and kind of able to throw him around. With that in mind, I'm cautiously in favor of this move to 135. The charm of Mitchell's game, and you use words like, instinctual and natural, and I think that's fair. And part of it is biased because anybody who's that book dumb, we just, but hey, you know what? Just because you are smart, talented, have a good comprehension of one thing doesn't mean that you're smart at everything. Hell, before I did this for a living, I spent 15 years working in the medical field, working for doctors, and not just any doctor, but like working for eye surgeons. I was a better speller than every single one of them. It doesn't mean I was a smarter guy. You know what I mean? Like he is kind of a savant at grappling, and like, yeah, he's not a dummy there. Like I'm sure he can explain to you the moves he's doing and what they're called. Like he's not a trained monkey on the ground. Like, he's a very good grappler, but even at his best, his wrestling was it was effective against certain opponents, but it's never been textbook. And he's never really had the athleticism to just be able to drag anybody on the ground, whether they want to go there or not. And for a grappling specialist like Mitchell, success is going to hinge on how often you're able to get the fight to the ground in the time, place, and position of your choosing. With all that said, I think this is a good first opponent for him in this new division, because you put it really well. If his last name was anything other than Nurmagomedov, I think at least I would have twigged a lot sooner to the fact that he is just an okay wrestler. Like he's pretty good at keeping things moving with scrambles. Like if somebody's taking him down and he doesn't want to be on the ground, he may not be able to defend the single or double leg perfectly, but he'll keep his hips moving and won't just concede the position and spend the rest of the round in guard. Same if he's trying to take the other guy down. If he's trying to take the other guy down and he can't get it down cleanly, like he won't do a full guard pull, but he'll just kind of do like a sacrifice throw, pull him down, and trust himself to come out on top. His last two losses in the UFC to Jonathan Martinez and Vinicius Oliveira, in both cases, and both of them were pretty competitive fights. In fact, I don't remember, but I think I may even have scored the Martinez fight for him. But in either event, they were both competitive fights. And in both cases, it was him trying to get the other guy down, and he was successful sometimes, but not successful every time. And that's basically what it hinged on. Like Martinez was able to stay upright in that last round enough to kick him a few more times. Oliveira, and I have a pretty clear memory that Oliveira was just basically stiff arming Nurmagomedov off him in the third round. Both guys tired. He lands a few more strikes. He wins the round. He wins the fight. It's going to be the opposite of that here, I think. Nurmagomedov should be a crisper striker than Mitchell. He doesn't have lights out power. Mitchell always had surprisingly good punching power at 145. If that carries over, he might actually be the harder hitter than Nurmagomedov, but Nurmagomedov just technically sharper, defensively better. So Mitchell's best chance to win this fight is going to be to get it to the ground. So it's going to be Nurmagomedov's same wrestling game, just in reverse. Can he stay upright enough to win 2 rounds out of 3 against Mitchell? I don't know if he can. And because of that, I am leaning towards Mitchell here to get it done in his bantamweight debut. Nurmagomedov at this point, at least in his UFC run, I remember all 3 of his UFC losses pretty clearly, and they were all competitive, pretty nip-tuck affairs. Nobody's come close to really, really threatening him on the ground. He may only have been wrestling goats on the way to school, but he was at least in the same wrestling room as the guys wrestling the bears. I'm thinking he makes it all 3 rounds against Mitchell, but it's pretty obvious who the superior ground fighter is. And yeah, I think Mitchell wins all 3 rounds. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC on ABC 9, a bantamweight matchup between former champ Petr Yan and up-and-coming contender Marcus McGee. Yan, the 32-year-old from Siberia, 18-5 overall, 10-4 in the UFC. As I mentioned, he is the former bantamweight champ, but after relinquishing that title to Aljamain Sterling 4 years ago in a disqualification and then losing a straightforward decision in the rematch, he's actually 3-4 since the first Sterling fight. Having said that, he's on a 2-fight winning streak now, comprising both of his cage appearances of 2024. He fought at UFC 299 last March and won a decision over Song Yadong, then came back in November in the headliner of UFC Macau and won a 5-round decision over former flyweight champ Deiveson Figueiredo. Yan would love to win his 3rd straight, turn aside, again, a rising surprise contender, and show the UFC that at age 32, he is still a factor in the title picture in this division. We'll see how it goes. Let's meet his opponent. McGee, 35-year-old living and training in Arizona, is 10-1 as a professional. He's 4-0 since joining the UFC 2 years ago. He has not yet fought this year. His most recent appearance was at UFC 309 last November, where he won a unanimous decision over Jonathan Martinez. McGee entered the UFC 2 years ago to fairly modest expectations, fairly quietly. He's now rising to the point where he is in the co-main event of a pretty major fight night card. He is fighting a former champ. He is going to be on the outskirts of the title discussion himself if he gets it done. Having said all that, he is not favored to do so. Yan is minus 375, McGee plus 275 as your underdog. Marcus McGee, even before he got to the UFC, he checked all the boxes to be a guy that never makes it to the UFC. And after, even when I heard he was debuting, checked all the boxes to be a guy that lost his first 3 fights and washed out without even finishing his first contract. Just, he looked good regionally, but he was knocking out some really overmatched competition. And it doesn't help that he has kind of this aged, weathered looking face that makes him look even older than he is. But if you're a bantamweight and you don't even debut as a pro until you're like 29, like, you have a very limited window in which to do your thing. Especially when there are people coming over from Dagestan that, you know, at age 25, they already have 20 career fights. But all he's done is knock the living bejesus out of everyone they've put in front of him. Jonathan Martinez, who is a very good bantamweight striker himself, is the first guy even to make it to the final horn against the guy. And as a kind of top 10-ish, top 15-ish talent himself, propelled McGee into where we see him now, where he's taken on Petr Yan. Now McGee's a big underdog. On the one hand, I understand why. McGee's stellar rise aside, Yan has been fighting better competition for much longer. Yan is, good grief, is Yan? Yeah, Yan is 3 years younger than Marcus McGee. And Yan, I think, has more top 10 fights than McGee has fights. Like, Marcus McGee has 11 career fights. At a glance, I can see 9 or 10 top 10 opponents for Petr Yan. Like, he's been fighting top level competition for years now. And as he's kind of proven, it's not like he's gone anywhere. He's lost 4 of his last 7 fights, but he lost by disqualification to Aljamain Sterling in a fight that he was otherwise winning. He lost by split decision to Aljamain Sterling, and I scored it for Sterling, but it's not as though Sterling blew him out of the water. He lost a split decision to Sean O'Malley in a fight that I scored for Yan. And again, if you're watching this, you might not agree with me. You might think O'Malley won, but it was contentious. So there is Jan again taking another champ to the wire in his own wheelhouse. Then yeah, he got run into the dirt by Merab, but Merab's doing that to literally everybody. Like, that's what Merab does to people. In between, Jan is beating top 5, top 7 contenders like Corey Sandhagen and Song Yadong, and not breaking much of a sweat in doing so. Like, you can make a solid case that Jan has never been worse than the 3rd best bantamweight in the UFC, even in the middle of losing streaks. So I get why Jan is a pretty big favorite here against McGee, because McGee has been surprising. I assumed the hand speed and power that he was flashing on the regional scene would kind of evaporate against, at least by the time he got to the Jonathan Martinez's of the world. I'm sure I picked Martinez to beat McGee, and I was wrong. I assumed Martinez would be able to keep McGee at kicking range instead of boxing range, saw his front leg off, slow him down, and hell, either win a decision going away or maybe even stop him late. And instead, it was McGee crowding him, making him miserable, McGee dictating the distance against the kicker. All of that said, McGee is at his best as a boxer, as a power puncher, and Jan is one of the best boxers in the division, one of the best boxers in the UFC. I think there's every chance that McGee just has a real hard time finding Jan, and more specifically, finding Jan's chin, nose, ribs. It's not an original thought. He didn't coin it, but Keith is fond of reminding us that the striking defense starts with your feet. It starts with not being there when your opponent swings at you, but being close enough that you can swing back. Jan is fantastic at that. He has outstanding footwork. He almost never backs straight up, great lateral movement. Very hard guy to cut off the cage on and walk him into the fence. He's one of the few fighters in all of MMA with actual decent head movement on the feet. He doesn't have overwhelming power himself, but he has fast hands, throws crisply in combination. And so, kind of like earlier Max Holloway, has the kind of power that adds up over the course of a fight. Not a ton of scintillating knockouts, but everyone he's fought has known that they were in a fight. McGee keeps on being faster and more explosive than I expect. So I'm guessing that he's going to find and catch Jan a few times during this fight. If he finds him and catches him enough times in the same round, he might win a round. But there's nothing I've seen from either guy that makes me think he's going to hurt Jan bad and be able to swarm, follow up, and knock him out. Like, that's not something I've seen out of Petr Yan. If McGee turns to trying to wrestle, Jan has proven to be a very capable defensive wrestler. Even Merab had to work at it. Like, Merab's takedown numbers got better and better as the fight went along, and Jan got more and more tired, more discouraged. But early on, Jan made him work for it, and Merab had 5 rounds to do it. Yeah, it's tough for me to see clear ways for McGee to win this fight. For him to win this fight would involve him doing things that I've not really seen people do to Jan. Either like soundly out wrestling him from fairly early on, or really catching him and hurting him on the feet. Give me Jan to turn the McGee Express back, at least temporarily. I think he's going to make McGee look a little bit basic on the feet. I think he's going to have McGee swinging at air a lot, just be able to slip, come back with counters, have McGee running at him in straight lines as McGee's going to try to corner him against the fence so he can just start unloading combinations. I think he's going to have a hard time finding him and catching him there. Give me Jan to win a decision and make it look kind of easy.
So I remember the first time that I saw Marcus McGee, I was thinking, wait a minute. Okay, he's looking old and weathered. Was he one of the guys that beat the crap out of Johnny Utah on Point Break? And then I realized he would have been like one when that movie came out or something like that. So no, that couldn't have been him.
And then you're like, did Terry Martin cut a bunch of weight and try to come back to the UFC? No, because then he'd be like 50.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Nice comeback on that one. Yeah, no, you couldn't have said it better when you said that. You know, he's got a weathered face that makes it look like he's older than what he is, and he's already old for a prospect. At the same time, it's hard.
Like the kind of guy that started shaving in 4th grade.
Yeah, no, exactly. Or somebody who's seen some shit. You know, like you see enough shit, it starts to affect you physically. I don't know what it is. The funny thing is, you know, you kind of do a little bit of research on these guys, and McGee seems like a legit cool dude. You know, like you look at his some of his picks and you think, oh man, that doesn't look like a guy I want to sit down and talk with. But he seems like he's very affable, and the fact that he's as old as he is as a prospect, it's actually a really fun story. One that it's kind of hard not to root for. I think part of the problem, though, is that a lot of people feel as though that Jan has been screwed over so often. You know, the DQ loss to Aljo was controversial. The second loss was controversial. I actually scored that one the same way you did. I scored it for Aljo, but I wouldn't have been upset had they given it to Jan. Yeah. And again, I scored the O'Malley fight the same way you did. I gave it to Jan, but I acknowledge that it was close enough that I have no problem with O'Malley getting it. And so I think a lot of people kind of at this point are strongly back Jan at this point because they feel like fate has just screwed him over time and again, you know. As when he was at his peak, it's hard to believe that he did not have a single successful title defense. When Jan was on, he was a whirling dervish. He was phenomenal. And I feel like he's kind of lost something since then because he's been in so many battles, you know. I don't think that he took too much damage in the Sterling fight because it was largely with the grappling that Sterling was able to outwit him. But he took a lot of damage in the Sandhagen fight. He took a lot of damage in the O'Malley fight. And Merab just broke him mentally and then broke him physically. And even though he's rebounded to win against Song Yadong and Davison Figueiredo since then, and he's looked good in those wins, he doesn't have the same aura about him that I feel like he had when he was trashing Aldo, when he was on his way to victory against Sterling in their first fight before the DQ happened. There's something missing, like I said, an aura or something. That doesn't mean that he's not a title contender, you know. That doesn't mean that he can't get the title back at some point, you know. I think people tend to forget that he's younger than Merab still at this point. So if Merab slips, you know, I could easily see Jan being the one that could capitalize upon that. Another way to put it, Jan had won and lost the UFC title at an age before McGee even made his, not UFC, his MMA debut. Yep. But yeah, I can't add too much aside from those things that I threw out there to what you've already said. Jan is a very savvy striker. It can take him a little bit while before he makes his reads and he really starts flowing. So it's very much possible that McGee can crack him early because, like you said, McGee continues to surprise us with his power. Because he's got a tremendous physique, but that face really is deceiving. You don't expect somebody with that type of face to be the athlete that they are because you expect them to be weathered and old. But yeah, no, he's
American
still
Francisco Trinaldo.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%. But the other thing that gives me pause on the idea of McGee pulling off that upset is the wins that McGee has. Because I'm with you. I picked against him to when he beat Martinez, but he didn't have a flawless performance against Martinez. We'll put it that way. He really slowed down the stretch. And no shame, Martinez is a quality opponent, but if I'm going to be picking the upset of Jan, I would have expected McGee to be able to have handled Martinez pretty flawlessly. And then the other wins that he has, let's see here: Journey Newsom, JP Bays, and Gaston Bolaños.
Like you pointed out, Jonathan Martinez is easily McGee's best win.
Yes.
Jonathan Martinez, and I like Jonathan Martinez, he has never even been within 2 wins of being able to get a fight with Petr Yan. That's the difference in level of competition between these two guys.
Yeah, this is a huge step up for McGee. This is a guy who has continually been overcoming the odds. So I want to throw that out there before I give my final stamp of approval on this fight. But, it gets to a point where you're like, this train ride has to end somewhere, and I hate to pick against him just because, like I said, at his age, making this type of run, that's freaking awesome. That this is the type of shit movies are made of. But movies are also not reality. And yeah, I've got to pick Jan. I think that he'll get into a groove. This is one of those fights where I think that the weather could be detrimental for McGee. I know that he trains out in the desert, but he trains out in the dry desert. And I think that Jan gets a late stoppage on him, 3rd round TKO.
With that, we come to the main event of UFC on ABC 9. A middleweight bout between former champ Robert Whittaker and rising contender Reinier de Ridder. Whittaker, the 34-year-old New Zealand-born Aussie, 26-8 overall. He is 17-6 since joining the UFC out of the Tough Smashes season, Australia versus UK back in 2012. 17-6 in the UFC, 14-4 at middleweight. He tried fighting at welterweight early in his run, had mixed results, though he never missed weight, and of his own volition decided to move up to a weight class where he just felt more comfortable. And despite giving up visible size to almost all of his opponents, won a title. That was a couple of years ago. Since then, he has remained at least in the title picture, but he's coming in off of one of the worst losses of his career, maybe the worst, depending on what you like or hate to see. He fought most recently last October at UFC 308, where Khamzat Chimaev face cranked him into submission in the first round, basically literally breaking his jaw, like knocking his teeth out of their sockets. It was gruesome. Whittaker tapped. He's been on the shelf ever since, 10 months. He is back now to defend at least his place in the middleweight pecking order against the upstart de Ridder. 34-year-old Dutchman is 20-2 overall. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in one championship. He was one's middleweight as well as light heavyweight champ, but if you're unfamiliar, remember that in one championship, they weigh in while nominally hydrated and have to pass a form of hydration test. Its efficacy is up for debate, but what it really means is he was their champ at 205 and 225 pounds. Made his UFC debut last November, and since then, he has 3 straight finishes. He tapped out Gerald Meerschaert in his debut. He tapped out Kevin Holland in January at UFC 311, and in his most recent appearance back in May at UFC on ESPN, Sandhagen versus Figueiredo, he knocked out previously undefeated wrestling super prospect Bo Nickel in the second round. So de Ridder more than justifying the UFC's decision to sign him out of one championship, at least thus far, as he is now headlining a card for the UFC, and he is very much going to be in the title discussion if he gets past the former champ Whitaker. Odds are fairly close on this one. Are you aware of what they are, Dane?
Cannot say that I am.
All right. The favorite is minus 150. The underdog is plus 120. Who are they?
So my natural instinct would be to say Whitaker because he's the established one, but the fact that you're asking me gives me pause. So I'm going to say that de Ridder's actually the favorite.
Okay, I have two pieces of advice for you. One, go with your first instinct. Two, never like meta think about me because I do shit randomly. Whitaker is your favorite, minus 150. De Ridder, the underdog, plus 120. This card is pretty well stocked with fighters that I was wrong about when they joined the UFC. I'm never shy about taking credit when I make a good call. I also try to own up to it when I get something wrong. I did not think de Ridder was going to make a splash in the UFC, at least not as a actual potential title contender in any division. Like if de Ridder dusts Whitaker and says some loud shit on the mic, he might be fighting Dricus du Plessis for the middleweight title by the end of this year. Like he's like that's what he's done basically. I did not think that was going to happen. In fact, I'm pretty sure I questioned whether he was even going to make 185 pounds ahead of his debut. I thought the UFC was being kind of silly to take this guy that had been doing secret bullshit non-weigh-ins in hotel ballrooms for one championship and ask him to actually make 186 pounds against Meerschaert. But he's made weight each time without apparent incident. He's looked good just physically by the eyeball test, and you can't argue with the results in the cage, because I think we've already said this on the show. When a high-level fighter, a former champ, comes over from a rival promotion, the UFC sometimes soft pedals them, sometimes brutalizes them, always based on what they think their own best interest is. But with de Ridder, you couldn't come up with a much better trio of first three opponents. They get three very different opponents, three very different tests for de Ridder, and de Ridder has passed them all with flying colors. Meerschaert is a guy that was going to be good-sized, but definitely give up athleticism to de Ridder, but a guy whose whole MO is finding ways to win, usually by submitting more skilled fighters late in fights when they get worn down, when they make a single mistake. And that includes some good grapplers. The fact that de Ridder is a good offensive grappler would not have saved him from just getting surprised, like Darce choked by Meerschaert. Then Kevin Holland. Even at 185, Kevin Holland, sharp striker, surprisingly capable of taking care of himself on the ground, and none of it mattered. De Ridder ran right through him. And then obviously the nickel fight, like the worst and most devastating thing that ever happened to the Shillen and Duffy show. Bo Nickal's first loss, where de Ridder, I mean, I hate using this term because it's so dismissive of prospects in general, Bo in particular, but definitely exposed. He exposed Bo Nickal's problems. Like, he showed Bo to be, for a guy that bragged / complained about walking in on fight week weighing 220 pounds, to actually not be very big or strong for a UFC middleweight. He exposed the gaps in his striking, and de Ridder's striking was not considered that great when he came to the UFC. And worst of all, made Nickel look very human as a takedown artist. Like, de Ridder is putting together a perfect resume to make the quickest and most direct possible route from another promotion into title contention in the UFC. The logical step here is a former champ in Whitaker that still seems to be performing near the top of his game. That's why I love this matchup. I don't love this matchup because it's hard not to love Robert Whitaker as a competitor. And if he loses this fight, it's it is probably the beginning of the long and brutal downward slope for him. What do we have for Whittaker? He's lost to Israel Adesanya twice. The first was a blowout. The second wasn't as close, I don't think, as people like to remember or think it was, just because it wasn't a complete blowout. They think of it as like this epic classic fight. Like, so he's lost twice to Adesanya. He lost to Dricus du Plessis, who has the magic power of being good at winning fights. And then Khamzat Chimaev. Like, in between, he's looked damn good. Like, he turned aside Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori. You go back a little ways, like people like Jared Cannonier, Darren Till. Still, like, aside from Adesanya and aside from du Plessis right at the end, nobody's winning striking battles with Robert Whittaker. And until the Chimaev fight, we'd not seen anybody just run roughshod over Whittaker on the ground like that. And there have been people who tried to take Whittaker down. He's always had extremely stout takedown defense and very good grappling of his own that just didn't get shown that much in the cage because, you know, he doesn't choose to go there and not many people could force him there. You know, like kind of the Shogun Hua thing where, yeah, anytime somebody made him go to the ground, he clearly could take great care of himself, just he preferred not to. If this thing stays on the feet, even as good as de Ridder's striking, like as relatively good as it's looked in the UFC, I think Whittaker will obliterate de Ridder if this thing stays. If de Ridder can't get this fight to the ground, the reach advantage isn't going to matter. The improvements in a striking aren't going to matter. Whittaker's dealt with all that before, and he and his team are very good at coming up with specific plans and specific wrinkles to deal with the fighters that they have coming up. Like I always go back to this, but just kind of like Alex Volkanovski, even though they train at, you know, two separate camps in the same continent, Whittaker will just always come with a wrinkle that you haven't seen before, but is just perfectly suited for dealing with the opponent in front of him. And I go back to the Darren Till fight, where he just had this little level elbow inside that he would keep tagging Till with when Till would try to get really into the phone booth and start throwing like short hooks and uppercuts. Whittaker would kind of hit him, hurt him, and stop his forward progress just with like it was like something Tony Ferguson would do, only not crazy. Anyway, if this thing stays on the feet, it's bad news for de Ridder. Just again, the height, the reach differential won't matter. Whittaker is a master at navigating that. If de Ridder has to get Whittaker down, which I think he does, his game has never been a level change in shot from the outside. He's always been a guy that does his best work from the clinch with like lateral drops, inside trips, judo throws, getting people against the fence and trying to change levels from there. Like, even though he's a tall guy, he's been pretty good at like kind of getting his level down to people's hips and getting him down that way. The way Chimaev brought Whittaker down is just not something I think Reinier de Ridder is capable of doing. Everything that happened after Chimaev got him down, that's possible. Like lightning quick back take, a mat return that was so quick that it almost wasn't a mat return. It was just a, nope, you're not going anywhere, drag you back down. Those are things that de Ridder could do, if not with quite the same like punishing panache. The actual finish where Chimaev just very clearly grins this evil grin and goes like, fuck a rear naked choke, I'm just going to squeeze until something crunches. De Ridder could do that. But I just don't think we get there. I've underestimated Reinier de Ridder at least twice in his 3 UFC bouts. I'm sure I know I picked him to lose to Mearshart and to Nickel. I'm at risk of being wrong 3 times in 4 fights. I think Whitaker wrecks Reinier de Ridder. I don't think de Ridder is done as a contender. I am impressed with how good he's looked, but Whitaker, if he's anything close to what he was even just a year ago, the guy that destroyed Ikram Alaskarov in this same arena a year ago, is a miserable style matchup for de Ridder as just a hard-hitting, aggressive striker who's super hard to take down. Give me Whitaker to TKO de Ridder in the second round after a very lopsided first round.
I think we've established why Keith took this show off. He didn't want to talk about the guy that derailed the Bo Nickel train. So, like you said, it was planned. He knew it was going to be de Ridder. We all love Robert Whitaker. He's along the lines. We're coming off of the fight between Poirier and Holloway, and we've been singing praises about how they're just two of the best guys in the sport, not just what they do in the cage and in terms of their entertainment value, but also what they do outside of the cage. And Whitaker is right up there with those two as well.
Yes.
So I often think that there's a little bit of a bias towards Whitaker when people are breaking down his fights, and I'm probably one of them as well, just because it's hard not to root for the guy. He's the type of representative that we want in this sport, and if we're being quite honest, that we need. The day that he is exposed with a weight tied around his appendage, we'll say, is the day that hell freezes over.
Yes.
That aside, trying to point out where I might have a bias, I don't want to discourage that not being a possibility of me in my pick. De Ridder has to take some solace in the way that Chimaev was able to beat him, exactly for the reasons that you said. De Ridder is going to try to do the exact same thing that Chimaev did, and that's just grab Whitaker, get him to the ground, and maul him from there. Because while de Ridder doesn't have the brutality that Chimaev has in terms of his work on the ground, he's probably a cleaner grappler, and
I would completely agree.
Yeah, and is more likely to be able to control Whitaker for long stretches. Because with Chimaev, he's going to go for something big, and at some point he's probably going to start to get tired. And if he doesn't get him out of there quickly, fortunately he did against Whitaker, but if he doesn't get you out of there quickly, he starts to tire. Like, think about the fight with Usman. Usman was able to make a comeback late because Chimaev makes these big explosive moves, these slams, and if he doesn't get you gone early, he's zapped. De Ridder looks like he's tired from within the first minute of the fight, if we're being honest with you. He always looks tired, but he's doing the same thing in the third round that he was doing in the first round. So I wonder if he's kind of got the same deal as like Dalby. Dalby always sounds tired. Yes. A lot of it is the way that his breathing technique. It sounds like he's tired, but he's always there at the end of the fight being just as effective. So I think de Ridder, if he could end up having more success on the ground consistently than what Chimaev would have. But this is also a 5-round fight. And you already commented that you were surprised that de Ridder was even able to make weight. And I'm with you. The guy, he may be the biggest middleweight on the roster. He's massive. But when you're also that large, you're probably also going to be one of the slowest middleweights on the roster. And that he absolutely is. He really is slow. I mean, credit to him. He understands his physical limitations, and he's been able to show very well with that. Despite him being slow, he he's proven better at cutting angles to get a hold of his opponent and stuff like that. But the opponents are also very telling of who he's been able to do that with. Gerald Meerschaert,
the only slower guy in the division.
Yeah, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. Kevin Holland. Holland is a superior athlete, no doubt, but he's also Kevin Holland. You know, you've said it a million times that Kevin Holland doesn't go into a fight knowing what he's going to do. He's just going out there to have a good time. De Ridder knew exactly what he wanted to do in that fight, and that's always been the problem with Holland. And then Nickel was willing to give De Ridder the fight that he wanted because, you know, Nickel figured, I can wrestle this guy, no problem. And that allowed De Ridder to get the fight that he wanted because De Ridder wanted to take him to the ground too. And De Ridder also recognized that, you know, this guy's fairly rudimentary on the feet. In other words, it proved that De Ridder's a smart fighter. Yeah. But just like you said, Whitaker, he's no dummy. He's been doing this for a long time. And even though he's been around forever, he's what, 33 or is he 34?
He's more than that even. No, he's 34, and here's the irony. He's younger than De Ridder. Like 3 months
exactly.
Younger. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It feels like he's been around forever, you know, but he's still I say only 34 because I believe his debut was back in 2012. You know, he's been around
UFC
forever.
Debut. Yeah, his UFC debut was in 2012. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's been ages since he was last champion. He's I think he's still got enough physically. I mean, he looked like $1 million against Aliskerov. I will admit, Aliskerov is quite a step down from what Whitaker was usually facing. And it could be argued that De Ridder also is, but I also think that De Ridder's a little bit more of a challenging stylistic matchup than Aliskerov was for Whitaker. But I think Whitaker's still got the physical abilities to run circles around him. I think it's going to be difficult for De Ridder to catch him and get him where he wants him. With Whitaker, I think people either overrate his wrestling or they underrate it. There's some people that swear, oh yeah, he could have been on the Australian Olympic wrestling team. And come on, let's be real, people. He wasn't that good, but he has come a long way from when he first started. And I think he'll be able to shuck off the majority of his takedown attempts. I think that he gets stronger as the fight goes, just because I don't think De Ridder can continue to chase takedowns deep into the championship rounds in the UAE. You know, that's a tough task. So given all those factors, I think that Whitaker can get him out of there as he's starting to get tired, because Whitaker is by far the superior striker that he has faced thus far. The question is, do I think it goes into the championship rounds? Yeah, I'll say that Whitaker gets a TKO stoppage 4th round.
All right, and there you have it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ABC 9, Whitaker versus De Ridder, also known as UFC Abu Dhabi. I have been Ben. He has been our man on the spot, Dane Fox. Dane, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, man. Like, this was a lot of fun.
Agreed. I'm always happy to come on, man. Thank you.
And if you're listening right now, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. Whether it's me with my usual co-host Keith or with a talented guest like Dane, we do our best to bring you a mix of in-depth analysis and occasional historic or humorous asides that we think is pretty unique in this space. Please do like, subscribe. Neither of those things cost you anything. They make our bosses happy. They allow us to continue bringing you this content free of charge. Please drop us a comment. I man the comment section. Keith usually mans the comment section. Dane might even check it out to see if you guys are slagging him. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. Dane and I each picked a couple of upsets. We disagreed on several fights. Let us know what time it is. If you think we missed any upset picks, if you think we're out of our minds with any of the ones we did make, let us know. Because if you're right and we're wrong, We will give you your flowers on the recap. You just have to come collect them. Keith and I will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights from the headliner on down to the first prelim, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. We will have the live chat open that whole time. We're taking your questions, your comments, your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.